Emmett Dawson pulled his dead son's rocking horse out of the room at the end of the hall and set it in the barn 4 years ago. Hadn't opened that door since. So when the girl showed up half dead on his fence line in the July heat, no shoes, no water burns on her arms that weren't from the sun, and whispered, "Mama said find you." Emmett did the one thing he swore he'd never do again. He carried a child into that house. By morning, the most powerful man in Kansas came to take her back. Emmett said no, and the whole county turned against him. If this story moves you, subscribe and follow Josie's journey to the very end. Drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Let's see how far her voice carries. July 1882. Kansas hadn't seen rain in 41 days. Emmett Dawson was mending fence wire on the south pasture when his horse spooked. The mare yanked sideways, snorted hard, ears flat. Emmett pulled the reins, scanned the road. Something on the ground. 50 yards out. Small. Not moving right. He rode closer. A girl. Face down in the dirt. One arm stretched out like she'd been reaching for the fence post and missed. Dress torn at the shoulder. No hat. No shoes. Feet blistered raw, cracked and bleeding. A canteen hung from her wrist by a strap, empty, bone dry, just dead weight she'd been too stubborn to drop. Emmett swung down and knelt, turned her over. The sunburn on her face had gone past red into something white and waxy. Her lips were split so deep they'd stopped bleeding. "Hey, open your eyes for me." She did. Pale blue-gray, glassy. She tried to talk, but her throat locked. He held his canteen to her mouth. Slow, small sips. She drank. Coughed. Drank again. Then her hand grabbed his wrist. Tight. Stronger than a half-dead child should grip. "Mama died." Her voice came out like sand on wood. "Nobody came. She said find you." Emmett went cold in the middle of a Kansas July. Find who? Dawson Ranch, the man there. She said he owed her. The girl's eyes rolled, focused, rolled again, fighting to stay conscious. "Can I sleep in your barn? Just tonight. I won't touch nothing." "How long you been walking?" "Since yesterday morning. 24 hours. In this heat. No water. 8 years old, if that." "You ain't sleeping in no barn," Emmett said. He lifted her. She weighed nothing. A sack of bird bones. Her head dropped against his chest, and she made a sound. Not crying. Smaller than that. The sound of a child who'd stopped expecting help and couldn't quite believe it was here. He put her on the horse, swung up behind, rode for the house. Louisa Garza had her hands inside a mare's belly, checking the foal's position, when Emmett came through the barn. "Louisa! Inside! Now!" She looked up, saw the girl, pulled her hands free, wiped them on her apron, and moved. They laid Josie on the kitchen table. Louisa worked fast. Wet rags, water between the lips, temperature check. She peeled the dress back to look at the sunburn, and her hand stopped. "Emmett, come look at this." He stepped closer. Under the sunburn across the girl's shoulders and back, thin white lines, evenly spaced, precise, not random. The kind of marks left by a belt swung with intention. And on her inner arm. 2 circles, round, puckered, cigar burns. Louisa's voice came out flat. "These are months old, some older. I see 'em. This wasn't son Emmett. This was a person. I said I see 'em." Louisa looked at him. 35 years old, born in Chihuahua, crossed the border at 14, delivered half the babies in Kiowa County. She'd seen ugly before. This was different. This was careful. "Who is she?" Louisa asked. "Don't know yet." The girl's eyes opened. She flinched when she saw Louisa's hands near her arm, pulled away fast, then caught herself, went still, controlled, like a dog that learned not to yelp because yelping made it worse. "What's your name?" Emmett said. "Josie, Josephine Kincaid." Louisa's hand stopped on the wet cloth. Emmett didn't move, didn't blink, Just let the names sit there between them like a live coal on a wood floor. Judge Kincaid, Louisa asked. Josie's whole body changed. Shoulders up, hands flat on the table, ready to run. The reaction was fast, automatic, trained into her by months of learning what happened when that name was spoken. He married my mama, Josie said. That don't make him my father. Nobody said it did. Emmett kept his voice level. Where's your mama? Dead. Consumption. April. And the judge? Put me on a wagon 2 days ago. Told the driver to take me to the Sisters of Charity in Wichita. Josie's jaw tightened. Driver stopped in Coldwater for whiskey. I climbed out the back and walked. You walked away from the wagon. I walked toward here. Why here? Because Mama told me to. Josie looked at him with those pale eyes. No tears. She'd used her tears up a long time ago. She said if anything ever happened to her, find the Dawson Ranch. Find the man there. He owes me Josie. He'll know what that means. The kitchen was quiet. A fly hit the window glass. Hit it again. Stupid, persistent buzzing against something it couldn't get through. Your mama, Emmett said. His voice came out wrong. Too rough, like his throat had shrunk. Before she married Kincaid. What was her name? Sarah. Josie blinked. Sarah Dawson. Emmett stood up from the table, walked to the sink, put both hands on the edge, squeezed until his knuckles cracked. 12 years. His baby sister. 23 years old the last time he saw her standing on this porch, screaming that Harlan Kincaid was a good man, a respectable man, a judge with a future. And Emmett 36, and full of stupid pride, yelling back that Kincaid was rotten under the polish. That she was making the worst mistake of her life. That if she walked through that gate, she needn't walk back. She'd walked. He'd watched her go, and told himself she'd come to her senses. 12 years. Not one letter, not one word. He'd known she lived 50 miles east. Could have saddled up any morning and ridden over. Could have swallowed his pride and said he was wrong. Could have knocked on the door and asked, "Are you all right?" He didn't. And now Sarah was 3 months in the ground and her daughter was on his kitchen table with a belt-marked back and cigar-burned arms. She's your sister's girl, Louisa, not asking. Yeah. You didn't know Sarah died. Nobody told me. Flat. Dead. Nobody tells the man who said don't come back. You're my uncle. Josie's voice. Clear. Cutting through his self-pity like a blade. Mama talked about you. Said you were pig-headed and mean and the best man she'd ever known. She left out the part where I let her down. No, she didn't. She told me that too. Josie sat up on the table, small, burned, beaten, 8 years old and already harder than anyone should have to be. She said you let her down and she forgave you anyway. Said that's what family does. Something broke in Emmett's chest. Quiet. Nothing dramatic. Just a crack running through a wall he'd built 4 years ago when they pulled his boy out of the creek. A wall he'd thought was permanent. Your mama was better than me, he said. I know, Josie said. But she sent me to you. So maybe she thought you were good enough. Emmett gave her the room at the end of the hall. He stood in the doorway a long time before he opened it. 4 years that door had been shut. His boy's bed. His boy's rocking horse. Wooden animals on the shelf lined up by size because Henry liked them that way. Small boots by the wall that would never be grown into. He opened the door. The air inside was stale and hot. Dust everywhere. A boy's room preserved in amber. Louisa carried in fresh sheets. Didn't say a word about what the room had been. Just stripped the old bedding, made it up clean, and left. Josie stood in the doorway. Looked at the rocking horse. The wooden animals. Whose room? My son's. Where is he? Gone. 4 years. Josie nodded. She didn't say sorry. Didn't say the things adults taught children to say about death. She just walked in, climbed onto the bed, and pulled the sheet up. Good night, Mr. Dawson. Emmett. Good night, Emmett. She was asleep in 2 minutes. Fever sweat on her forehead. Her breathing shallow but steady. One hand tucked under the pillow, the other hanging off the edge of the bed, fingers curled. Even in sleep, she looked ready to run. Emmett closed the door, leaned against the hallway wall, slid down until he was sitting on the floor. His boy's room. Another child in his boy's bed. And somewhere 50 miles east, a grave he'd never visited holding the sister he'd failed. He sat there until midnight. Then he got up, splashed water on his face, and went to the porch. The heat didn't break at night anymore, just softened. Cicadas screaming in the grass like the whole prairie was in pain. The carriage came at dawn. Emmett heard it before he saw it. Hooves on packed dirt. The jingle of polished hardware. He was already standing when it crested the hill. Black carriage, matched bays. A driver in a gray coat, and behind Deputy Tom Jessup on horseback badge winking in the first light. The carriage stopped. The door swung open. Judge Harlan Kincaid stepped out like he was entering a courtroom. 55, tall, gray temples. Black suit in July, and not a drop of sweat on him. His boots hit the dirt without raising dust like even the ground knew better. Mr. Dawson. That voice, calm, measured, the voice of a man who'd never had to raise it because people obeyed the quiet ones faster. I believe you're harboring my stepdaughter. I believe she walked 20 miles through the heat to get away from you. Kincaid smiled, patient, the way you smile at a dog that doesn't understand the command yet. Children are impulsive. She was being transported to a care facility. She wandered away from the wagon. These things happen. Wandered. No shoes, no water, July heat. That's your story. That's the truth, Mr. Dawson. Kincaid reached into his coat, pulled out a document, territorial seal, his own signature at the bottom. Guardianship order, signed and filed 2 days after her mother's death. I am her legal custodian. This isn't a request. Emmett looked at the paper, didn't take it. Her back's covered in belt marks, Judge. 2 cigar burns on her arm. You want to explain that to me? Kincaid didn't flinch, didn't hesitate, didn't even blink. Josie is a troubled child. Her mother's illness was prolonged and traumatic. She's been known to self-harm and fabricate stories. I've consulted with Dr. Pruitt in Dodge City. He'll confirm. Dr. Pruitt, who owes you for the mortgage on his practice. Dr. Pruitt, who is a licensed physician, as opposed to your midwife. Kincaid tucked the paper back. Let me be direct. I have legal custody. You have nothing. No guardianship, no adoption papers, no standing. You're harboring a ward of the court. That's a criminal act. I can have Deputy Jessup arrest you right now. Jessup shifted in his saddle. His hand didn't go to his cuffs, but it didn't move away either. I'm offering you courtesy, Kincaid continued. Return the child, no charges, we move on. And if I don't, then I file a formal complaint, schedule a hearing within the week, and Mr. Dawson. Kincaid tilted his head, just slightly, like a hawk adjusting its angle on a mouse. I sit on that bench. I am the hearing. There it was, the trap. Clean. Elegant. A man who didn't need to threaten because the entire legal structure was his weapon. He didn't break the law. He was the law. Emmett looked at the carriage, polished, expensive. Looked at Jessup, decent man trapped. Looked at Kincaid's hands, clean, manicured. Hands that had never swung a belt themselves. That's what made him worse than a common brute. He kept his hands clean and let the system do the beating. No. Kincaid's smile held, but something behind his eyes moved, a recalculation. I'm sorry. I said no, she ain't going back with you. Not today, not any day. You understand the consequences. I understand a child walked 20 miles in bare feet to get away from you. That tells me everything the law won't. The law is all that matters here, Mr. Dawson. Then the law's wrong. Kincaid studied him. 5 seconds. 10. The way a man looks at a locked gate, figuring whether to pick it or break it. Your sister said something similar, Kincaid said, quiet, almost gentle. About the law being wrong, about fighting it. He adjusted his cuffs. She's buried in the East Plot at Cedar Hill, if you'd like to visit. See how fighting worked out for her. Emmett's fist curled, his arm tensed. Every part of him wanted to close that distance and break Kincaid's jaw. But Kincaid's eyes were waiting for it, wanting it. One punch, and the unstable bachelor violent man, unfit guardian story writes itself. Emmett uncurled his fist, finger by finger. Get off my land, Judge. Kincaid turned to his carriage, hand on the door, paused. I'll see you in court, Mr. Dawson. 6 weeks. I'll make sure the whole county attends. He climbed in. Door shut. Through the window. Find yourself a lawyer. You'll need the best one you can't afford. The carriage pulled away. Dust rose behind it and hung in the still air like a question nobody wanted to answer. Jessup lingered, brought his horse close, dropped his voice. Mr. Dawson, I seen that girl before, at the judge's house, last winter. She was carrying firewood bigger than her, barefoot in the snow. I reported it. To who? Jessup's face twisted. To Judge Kincaid. He handles all county welfare cases. He looked down at his hands on the reins. System's rigged, Mr. Dawson. I got a wife and 3 children who eat because of this badge. That ain't an excuse. But it's the reason I'm still wearing it. Then take it off. Jessup looked at him, long and hard. Then he rode after the carriage without another word. Emmett stood alone. The sun was already mean at 7 in the morning. Heat waves rising off the dirt road. He's coming back. Josie, in the doorway, she'd heard it all. Yeah. He always does. Mama tried to leave once. Got as far as Dodge City. He was on the platform when we stepped off the train. Smiling. Didn't raise his voice. Just said, Sarah, let's go home. Like we'd taken a wrong turn and needed help finding our way back. Emmett crouched down, eye level. I ain't your mama, Josie. I don't run. He doesn't chase people, Emmett. That's not how he works. He just makes everything legal, files papers, gets signatures, moves quiet. By the time you realize what happened, the cage is already built, and the lock's already on, and the whole world calls it justice. Her voice was flat, practiced, like she'd rehearsed this. Maybe she had. Maybe Sarah had taught her these words the way other mothers taught prayers. Mama said the worst prison is one the law built for you. Smart woman. Smart didn't save her. Josie held his gaze. What's gonna save me? Emmett didn't have an answer. Didn't pretend to. I don't know yet, but I ain't quitting on you. Mama said that too. And she didn't quit, did she? She sent you here. She planned that. Even dying, she made sure you'd end up at this gate. Josie's chin quivered. 1 second. Then it locked. 8 years old, and already better at holding herself together than grown men Emmett had known. She hid papers, Josie said. Real ones, before she got too sick. What kind of papers? The will. The real deed. The marriage papers that show my real father's name, not Kincaid. Josie's voice dropped. Mama married Kincaid when I was 3, but my real papa was a man named Samuel Rourke. He died in a mine collapse when I was 2. Left me land. 40 acres and a water claim. Kincaid married Mama to get it. That's what she figured out. That's why she started hiding things. Where'd she hide them? The dry well, behind our garden. She went out at night when Kincaid was sleeping, lowered a tin box on a rope, covered the well with boards. After Mama died, Kincaid bricked it over. Put a planter on top, roses. Josie's mouth twisted. He planted roses on top of my mama's truth. Emmett's hands were shaking, not fear, something hotter. Something that had been dead inside him for 4 years and was waking up angry. Your mama told you all this. She made me memorize it, every night for a month before she died, like a prayer. She said, "Josie, if I don't make it, you find your Uncle Emmett. Tell him where to dig. Tell him the truth doesn't burn, even when everything around it does." The heat pressed down on them. The cicadas screamed. Somewhere out on the pasture, a cow bellowed, lonely, restless. "All right," Emmett said. "We'll get those papers. Kincaid's house. His property. He'll have men watching. Then we'll go at night. He'll know it was you. Let him." Josie studied his face, reading him the way children read adults when their survival depends on knowing who to trust. "You mean it," she said, not a question. "I mean it. Mama was right about you. About the pig-headed part. About the good enough part." By noon, Emmett had 3 people at his kitchen table. Ada Whitfield came first, 62, ran the post office for 19 years. Gray hair pinned tight, eyes like a hawk. She knew every letter, every package, every secret that passed through Kiowa County, because all of it went through her hands. Louisa came second, still had horse smell on her apron, didn't apologize for it. Tom Carruthers came last, 50, saloon owner, soft gut and shaky hands. He owed Kincaid $400 and everyone knew it. He'd ridden out on his own hat in hand, sweat-soaked, and said, "I want to help. I know you got no reason to trust me. I'm here anyway." Emmett poured coffee, set 4 cups on the table, didn't sugarcoat it. "Kincaid's coming for her. 6 weeks. He'll do it legal and proper, and the whole county'll watch him take her back with a judge's blessing, his own blessing." "Can't fight a judge in his own court," Ada said. "Federal jurisdiction." Emmett leaned forward. "Land fraud, forged deeds, that's federal. Different bench, different judge. Kincaid's got no reach in Topeka." "You sure about that?" "No, but it's the only shot." "What do you need?" Louisa asked. "Evidence. The girl says Sarah hid papers in the dry well at Kincaid's place. A will, a land deed, proof the marriage was about the property, not the woman." "That well's on Kincaid's land," Tom said, "behind the house. He bricked it over. You've seen it. I delivered a case of bourbon there last March. Saw the brickwork. Fresh. Mortar still curing." Tom's hands tightened around his coffee cup. "Didn't think nothing of it then." "I got more." Ada pulled folded papers from her coat pocket. "Sarah wrote 3 letters to the territorial governor's office. January this year. I handled the mail. First 2 went out. Third one, Kincaid came to the post office himself. Asked to see outgoing correspondence. Said he was looking for a misdirected letter of his own. And Sarah's 3rd letter was gone the next morning, and I got a visit from Jessup saying the judge needed all mail records sealed for a pending legal matter." Ada's jaw set. "I kept copies, my own hand. I know what she wrote. She was asking the governor to investigate her husband for fraud theft and what he was doing to her child." The table was quiet. Coffee going cold, flies against the window. "There's more," Louisa said. She hadn't touched her cup. Her hands were flat on the table, steady. But her voice wasn't. "I delivered Josie, 8 years ago, July of '74, at the Kincaid house. It was Sarah's first marriage then, to Samuel Rourke. Good man, quiet, minor. I know the name. After Samuel died, Kincaid started coming around, helping the widow, bringing food, being kind." Louisa's lip curled on the word kind. 6 months later, they were married. I came back when Josie was 4 for a fever check. Sarah had bruises on her wrists, fresh. She said she caught them in the door." "And you believed her?" "No." Louisa met his eyes. "I didn't believe her. I just didn't say anything. Because Kincaid paid double what any family paid for my services. Because I needed the money. Because I told myself it wasn't my business." Her voice cracked. "That's my sin, Emmett. I've been carrying it 3 years. I'll carry it the rest of my life." Tom cleared his throat. 6 months before Sarah died, she came into my saloon. Only time in 12 years she ever walked through that door. Sat down. Ordered whiskey. hands shaking. Everyone waited. She said she found papers in Kincaid's study, legal documents, land transfers, her daughter's inheritance being signed over to Kincaid's name, forged signatures. She said she was going to stop him. Tom stared at the table. I told her to be careful. That was all I said. Be careful. Like that was enough. Like careful ever stopped a man like Kincaid. She had consumption, Emmett said. Yeah, and every doctor in the county answers to the judge. A sick woman doesn't get her medicine, nobody calls it murder. They call it God's will. Tom's voice went hoarse. She asked me to remember what she told me. I said I would. That's the one promise I kept. The kitchen. Hot. Still. 4 people carrying guilt like stones in their pockets. I need someone to ride to Topeka, Emmett said. File with the federal court. I can't leave. I leave this ranch Kincaid files for immediate custody before I'm past the county line. I'll go. Tom. Quiet but firm. Emmett looked at him. Soft gut. Shaky hands. $400 in debt to the man they were about to fight. He'll know, Emmett said. The minute you leave town, he'll know something's wrong. Let him. I'll tell folks I'm going to Topeka for whiskey supply. Nobody questions a drunk buying more drink. Tom's mouth twisted. First time being the town drunks worked in my favor. It'll cost you everything if this goes wrong. It's already cost me everything, Emmett. I watched a woman walk into my saloon scared for her life, and I poured her a drink and said, be careful. That's been costing me every night since. Ada stood, smoothed her skirt. 6 weeks. Nobody talks outside this room. Not to family, not to friends, not to God in confession. Kincaid's got ears everywhere. She looked at each of them. We get this wrong, he won't just stop us. He'll erase us, make it legal, make it clean, make it look like we brought it on ourselves. Nods, one by one. Tom left first, then Ada. Louisa stayed to check Josie's fever. Emmett walked to the barn, stood in the heat, leaned his head against the rough wood and breathed. 12 years. His sister had been 50 miles away, married to a monster, and he'd done nothing because she'd chosen Kincaid, and he'd told her not to come back, and pride was easier than admitting he was wrong. Sarah had died reaching for help. 3 letters to the governor. A box in a dry well. A daughter memorizing directions like battle plans. And Emmett had been here the whole time, mending fence wire, counting cattle, living inside his grief, like it was a house he'd chosen instead of a prison he'd built. Emmett. Josie. At the barn door. Borrowed dress too big. Sunburn peeling. Those Dawson eyes. Mama said you had horses. Yeah. Can I see them? He took her inside. 6 stalls. The big roan mare, Copper, the one that spooked at shadows and bit strangers, stretched her neck over the gate and pressed her nose into Josie's palm. Blew warm air through her fingers. Josie laughed. The sound hit Emmett like a fist. Not because it was loud, because it was surprised. The laugh of a child who'd forgotten laughing was something she was allowed to do. She likes me, Josie said. She don't like anybody. You're the exception. The judge said I wasn't special. Said I was expensive and ordinary. The judge is a liar. Josie stroked Copper's neck. Mama said that too, every night. She'd tuck me in and whisper, You're not expensive, Josie. You're priceless. Don't let any man tell you different. Emmett's throat closed. Can I ride her tomorrow? You ever ridden before? No. But Mama said Dawsons learn fast. He almost smiled. Almost. Tomorrow morning. 5 o'clock. Dawn count. What's dawn count? You'll see. Josie looked up at him, something shifting in her face. Not trust yet. Trust was too expensive for a child who'd been burned. But something close to it. Something like the first crack in a door that had been locked a long time. Emmett, Yeah. Thank you for the water today. She paused. And for not being the barn. She went inside, small footsteps on the porch, screen door banging shut. Emmett stood in the barn with his hand on Copper's neck. The mare turned her head, looked at him with one dark eye. I know, he said to the horse. I know. Outside, the Kansas sun was dropping. The sky was turning copper and rust. Somewhere east, a man in a black suit was filing papers to take back a child he'd beaten and starved and caged, and the law called him guardian. 6 weeks. Emmett had 6 weeks to break a system built to protect men like Kincaid. 6 weeks to dig up a dead woman's truth from a bricked-over well. 6 weeks to prove that a stubborn rancher with no legal standing and a table full of guilty strangers could outfight a judge who owned the court. He didn't know if 6 weeks was enough. But a girl had walked 20 miles in bare feet to find him because her dying mother said he was good enough. And for the first time in 4 years, Emmett Dawson decided to believe her. 5 in the morning, and the heat was already building. Emmett saddled Copper and the gray gelding. Josie appeared at the barn door dressed in rolled-up work clothes. Louisa had found boots 3 sizes too big, stuffed with rags at the toes. You're early, Emmett said. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking the carriage would come back. It won't. Not today. How do you know? Because Kincaid don't repeat himself. He made his move. Now he'll wait for me to make mine. That's how he works. Patient. Josie climbed the fence rail and swung onto Copper's back. The mare shifted, but held steady. Josie grabbed the reins the way Emmett had showed her yesterday. Not too tight, not too loose. Where are we going? East pasture, dawn count. Every morning I ride out and check the herd. You listen. You watch. You learn to read 100 head of cattle by sound before the sun clears the ridge. They rode out. Josie was a natural in the saddle. Sat straight. Moved with the horse instead of fighting it. The Dawson blood showing itself in ways that had nothing to do with paper or law. The herd was scattered across the dry grass, dark shapes against brown. Emmett stopped at the rise and sat quiet. What do I listen for? Josie asked. Anything that don't sound right. Healthy cattle got a rhythm, low and steady. When something's off, you hear it before you see it. She closed her eyes, tilted her head. Emmett watched her, and something twisted in his chest. Henry used to do the same thing, tilt his head when he was listening hard. Same angle, same concentration. That one. Josie pointed toward the far fence. The small brown one. She sounds different, like she's coughing. Emmett rode over. Miguel, his ranch hand, was already there, crouched beside the calf. He looked up. Bloat boss. Caught it just now. Emmett turned to Josie. How'd you know? I didn't know. I just heard it was wrong. She paused. Mama used to say, hearing is the first thing they try to take from you. If you can still hear what's true, they haven't won yet. Miguel glanced at Emmett. His eyes said what his mouth didn't. This girl's got it. You did good, Emmett said. Josie sat up a little taller on Copper's back. Not much, but enough. The first time since she'd arrived that her body wasn't braced for a blow. They rode back as the ranch woke up. Louisa was on the porch with coffee. She watched Josie dismount, saw the way the girl patted Copper's neck, and whispered something in the mare's ear. She's Sarah's daughter, Louisa said quietly when Josie went inside. Yeah. I mean, she's exactly Sarah's daughter. Same hands. Same way of talking to animals like they understand. They do understand. Sarah always said that. I know. I was there when she said it. Louisa's voice caught. I was there for a lot of things I should have acted on. Emmett drank his coffee. Didn't answer. There was enough guilt at this table for everyone. Tom Carruthers left for Topeka that afternoon. Told the saloon regulars he was going east for a whiskey supply deal. Nobody questioned it. Tom had been making whiskey runs for years, the perfect cover for a man nobody took seriously. Emmett walked him to his horse at the edge of town. 300 miles, Emmett said. 5 days if you push it. I'll push it. Kincaid's got connections. If anyone asks where you're really going, Nobody asks a drunk anything, Emmett. That's the one advantage of 20 years of disappointing people. They stopped paying attention. Tom tightened the saddle strap. His hands were steadier than Emmett had ever seen them. I ain't had a drink in 4 days. Since when? Since I sat at your kitchen table and told you about Sarah walking into my saloon. Couldn't drink after that. Every time I picked up the bottle, I saw her face. He mounted up. I'll be back in 10 days, maybe less. Tom? Yeah. Don't stop in Coldwater. Kincaid's got people there. I know. I'll swing south through Ashland. Longer but cleaner. Tom looked down at him. Emmett, if something happens to me on the road, the filing papers are in my left saddlebag. Names, dates, everything Ada wrote up. Get them to the federal clerk in Topeka. His name's Raymond Walsh. Ada says he's honest. Nothing's going to happen to you. Maybe not, but Sarah probably thought the same thing. Tom clicked his tongue, and the horse moved. He didn't look back, just rode east into the heat like a man who'd finally found a reason to sit up straight. Emmett watched him disappear. Then he rode home. Sunday came, and Emmett brought Josie to church. Louisa had altered one of her own dresses, simple cotton, blue. Josie looked uncomfortable in it, kept pulling at the collar like it was choking her. You don't have to go, Emmett said on the porch. Mama went every Sunday, said God listens even when judges don't. They rode in. The church was packed. Word had spread. The whole county knew Emmett Dawson was keeping Judge Kincaid's stepdaughter. Opinions had already hardened before anyone heard a fact. Emmett sat in the back pew. Josie beside him, hands folded in her lap. She sat perfectly still. The posture of a child who'd learned that being noticed meant being punished. Reverend Elijah Boone stood at the pulpit. 45. Former Union soldier. The only black preacher in 3 counties. He'd built this church with his own hands after the war, and half the town still whispered about whether he belonged in it. Boone read from Matthew. The sermon was about mercy, about the distance between what the law demanded and what God required. He didn't look at Emmett, didn't need to. Everyone in the room knew who the sermon was for. Then the doors opened. Kincaid walked in, late, deliberate. Every head turned. He wore his black suit, his gold watch chain. He nodded to the congregation the way a man nods to people he owns. He didn't sit down. He stood at the back opposite Emmett's pew and waited until the sermon finished. Then he stepped forward. Reverend, if I may. Boone's face didn't change. The floor is open for community concerns, Judge. As always. Kincaid faced the congregation. 60 people. Farmers, ranchers, shopkeepers. People who owed him money. People whose mortgages he held. People whose land disputes he'd ruled on. Brothers and sisters, I come to you not as a judge, but as a grieving stepfather. His voice carried easy, warm, practiced. My stepdaughter Josie, whom many of you know, has been taken from my care by a man who, however well-intentioned, has no legal right to her. Emmett felt Josie's hand find his under the pew, cold, trembling. Mr. Dawson lost his own son 4 years ago, Kincaid continued. A tragedy that broke him. We all saw it. The isolation, the withdrawal, the refusal of help or company. He paused, letting the weight settle. I fear Mr. Dawson is trying to replace what he lost, using my stepdaughter to fill a void that cannot be filled. This isn't guardianship. This is a man's grief wearing the mask of charity. Murmurs through the pews, heads nodding. The front row matrons exchanging looks that said they'd been thinking the same thing. I am filing a formal petition with the territorial court, Kincaid said. I ask only for your prayers and your trust that the law will protect this child. He sat down. Third pew, center aisle, the seat of a man who wanted everyone to see him from the front. Reverend Boone looked at Emmett, a long look. Then he spoke. Judge, I appreciate your concern. I'll add one thing to your remarks. Boone's voice was different from Kincaid's. Rougher. Earned. The voice of a man who'd carried a rifle at 19 and buried friends at 20. In my experience, the law protects the powerful just fine. It's the powerless that need protecting. And in my church, we do that by telling the truth, not by telling stories. Kincaid's smile didn't flicker, but his hand went to his watch chain, touched it, the tell of a man recalculating. After the service, 3 families who'd always greeted Emmett crossed the street to avoid him. Mrs. Hartwell, 70-town matriarch, walked past like he was a fence post. But Jenkins, the general store owner, stopped, his wife beside him. "Don't let the church theater shake you," Jenkins said. "Half those people owe him money. The other half are scared of him. Fear ain't the same as belief." "Feels the same when your kid's the one they're scared about," Emmett said. Mrs. Jenkins crouched down to Josie. "You remember me, sweetheart? I used to bring honey cake to your mama." Josie studied her face. "You stopped coming. After Mama got sick? You stopped." Mrs. Jenkins flinched. "I did. The judge said Sarah needed rest and shouldn't have visitors. I should have come anyway." "Yes, ma'am, you should have. 8 years old and already delivering verdicts cleaner than any judge." They rode home in silence. Josie stared at the road. "He's going to win," she said. "He always wins." "Not this time." "You sound like Mama." Emmett pulled the horse up, stopped right there on the road, turned to face her. "Josie, your mama fought alone. She didn't have anybody. No help, no witnesses, no one who'd stand with her. You understand what's different now. What? You got 4 people who ain't leaving, 5 counting you. Your mama had 0. Josie thought about that. Her jaw worked the way it did when she was processing something big. "Mama had me," she said quietly. "And she saved you. That counts for more than any courtroom." They rode on. That night the screaming started. Emmett was at his desk going through Ada's copies of Sarah's letters when Josie's voice ripped through the house. He took the stairs fast, found her sitting up in bed, eyes open, but not seeing, caught somewhere between sleep and the nightmare. "No, he's coming. The medicine, Mama needs the medicine." Emmett sat on the edge of the bed. Didn't grab her. Didn't restrain. Just sat. "Josie, you're at the ranch. You're safe." Her eyes found him. Focused. The terror didn't leave, but it recognized where she was. "He took Mama's medicine." Her voice was raw. "Dr. Pruitt brought it every week. Brown bottle. Mama said it helped her breathe. Then one day it stopped coming. Mama sent me to the doctor's office. I walked 2 miles. What happened? Dr. Pruitt said the judge canceled the prescription. Said Mama didn't need it anymore. Said she was getting better." Josie's hands twisted the sheet. She wasn't getting better. She was coughing blood. Every night. She put a rag in her mouth so I wouldn't hear. Emmett's hands curled on his knees. "I went back to Dr. Pruitt 3 more times. Begged him. The last time he shut the door in my face. Didn't even open it all the way. Just looked through the crack and said, 'I'm sorry, Josie. I can't help your mother. The judge has made his decision.'" The room was quiet, except for Josie's breathing. Ragged. Fast. The breathing of a child reliving the moment she understood that adults could choose to let her mother die. "How long?" Emmett asked. His voice sounded wrong, like someone else was using it. "Between when the medicine stopped and when she died." 7 weeks. 7 weeks. Sarah coughing blood into a rag. Josie walking 2 miles to beg a doctor who wouldn't open his door. And Kincaid in his pressed suit eating dinner, going to church, shaking hands, waiting for his wife to die so he could file guardianship papers 2 days later and steal a dead woman's daughter's land. "Emmett," Josie's voice went small, "is what the judge did to Mama called murder?" He looked at her. 8 years old. Asking a question no child should have to form. "I don't know what the law calls it," he said, "but I know what I call it." "What?" "Evil. The patient kind. The kind that fills out paperwork and shakes your hand while it kills you. Josie lay back down. Her eyes stayed open. Mama stopped eating the last 2 weeks. Gave me her food. Said she wasn't hungry. But I knew. I was 8, not stupid. She was making sure I ate because she knew she was dying, and she wanted me strong enough to walk. Emmett couldn't speak. She planned it, Emmett. My mama planned everything. The well. The letters. Telling me your name. Making me memorize the directions. She spent her last month alive making sure I'd survive what came after. Josie's voice cracked for the first time. She spent her dying on me. Emmett reached over and took her hand. Small. Hot. Alive. Then we don't waste it, he said. She held on. Tight. And somewhere around midnight, her grip loosened, and she fell asleep. And Emmett sat there in the dark room that used to be his son's, holding his sister's daughter's hand, and the weight of everything he'd failed to do pressed down on him like dirt on a coffin. Monday morning. Louisa rode in fast. Her horse was lathered. She didn't dismount clean. Half fell off the saddle and grabbed the porch rail. He came to my house. She was breathing hard, scared. Emmett had never seen Louisa scared. Last night, after dark, knocked on the door, polite, always polite. What did he say? Said he'd heard I was spending time at the Dawson Ranch. Said he hoped I wasn't involving myself in a custody matter that didn't concern me. Louisa's hands were shaking. Then he mentioned my papers, my residency papers. Said the territorial office had been reviewing immigration documents. Said mistakes happen. Said sometimes people who've lived here 20 years find out their papers were never properly filed. He threatened to deport you. He didn't use that word. He didn't use any word that a witness could repeat in court. He just smiled and said, I'd hate for a misunderstanding to uproot your life, Miss Garza, after all you've built here. Louisa's jaw tightened. 20 years, Emmett. I've delivered 100 babies in this county. I've saved cattle and horses and people, and he can erase me with one letter to the territorial office. Are your papers clean? Yes, filed in 63, notarized, legal. Then he's bluffing. He's not bluffing. He's warning. Louisa looked at him hard. This is what he does. He doesn't hit. He doesn't threaten. He just shows you how small you are and how big the system is, and he lets you do the math. Josie was in the doorway. She'd heard. He did that to Mama, Josie said. Showed her how small she was, every day, with a smile. Louisa looked at the girl, then back at Emmett. Her shaking stopped. Something harder took its place. I'm not Sarah, Louisa said, and I'm not leaving. He'll come again. Let him. I documented Josie's injuries, drew them, measured them, dated them. It's locked in a box at Ada's post office. If anything happens to me, Ada sends it to Topeka with Tom's filing. You planned that already. I planned it the night I sat at your kitchen table and told you about Sarah's bruises. I spent 20 years being quiet. Being quiet is done. Emmett nodded. Something shifted between them. Not romance. Not even friendship exactly. Alliance. The real kind. Forged in shared guilt and the decision to stop carrying it silently. Tuesday. Ada came with news. I found the other letters. She sat at the kitchen table and spread papers across the wood. Not Sarah's. The governor's office wrote back. 2 replies to Sarah's first 2 letters. They were in the county mail archive, filed under miscellaneous, meaning Kincaid intercepted the responses and buried them. What did the governor's office say? First letter, standard acknowledgement. Your concerns have been noted. An investigation will be initiated. Second letter, different. Urgent. Mrs. Kincaid, we take allegations of judicial misconduct seriously. A federal inspector has been assigned to Kiowa County. Please provide additional documentation at your earliest opportunity. Emmett stared at the letters. They were going to investigate him. They were. And then Sarah's third letter disappeared. And the governor's office never heard from her again. and 2 months later, she was dead. Ada's voice was steady, but her hands pressed flat on the table. He didn't just steal her medicine, Emmett. He stole her rescue. The help was coming, and he cut the line. That's 3 federal offenses: mail tampering, obstruction, fraud. 4. If we can prove the medicine. 5. If the land deeds are forged. Josie was sitting in the corner. She'd taken to sitting in on these meetings without being asked. Nobody told her to leave. She had more right to be there than any of them. "The well," Josie said. "Everything Mama hid is in the well. The real deed, the real will. Papa Samuel's land grant. And something else." "What else?" "Mama's diary. She wrote in it every night after the judge went to sleep. Everything he did. Everything he said. Dates, names. She said if the law wouldn't listen to a living woman, maybe it'd listen to a dead one." Ada closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were wet. "That woman," Ada said. "That brave, stubborn woman." "We need that well," Emmett said. "It's on Kincaid's property, behind the house. He bricked it over and planted roses on top." "I know." "If he catches you on his land, he'll have you arrested. Trespassing. Breaking and entering. He'll use it to prove you're unfit." "Then he better not catch me." Emmett. "Ada. My sister buried the truth in a hole in the ground because it was the only safe place left in her world. She died trusting that someone would dig it out. I ain't leaving it there." Wednesday. Reverend Boone rode out to the ranch unannounced. Emmett was shoeing a horse when the preacher dismounted in the yard. "Reverend." "Mr. Dawson, I came to tell you Kincaid visited me yesterday, suggested my church's land grant might have irregularities, suggested the county might need to review it." "Same play he used on Louisa. Same play he's used on half this county for 15 years. Boone leaned against the fence. "I built that church with my own hands. Every board, every nail. Carried the lumber from Dodge City in a wagon with 2 broken wheels. I didn't survive Chickamauga to lose my church to a man who fights with paperwork. You here to help or to warn me? Both." Boone looked toward the house where Josie was visible through the kitchen window, reading at the table. "I married Samuel Rourke and Sarah Dawson in my church. Summer of '73. I have the marriage certificate, original, with Samuel's full name and Sarah's maiden name. And I have the baptism record for Josephine Sarah Rourke. Not Kincaid. Rourke." Emmett straightened up from the horse's hoof. "That proves Josie's real parentage. It proves she's Samuel Rourke's daughter. It proves the land grant passes to her, not to Kincaid. And it proves Kincaid had no biological claim when he filed for guardianship." Boone pulled a folded paper from his coat. "I keep copies of all my records in a strongbox at my house, not at the church. I learned a long time ago that the things powerful men want to destroy should be kept where they don't think to look." "A black preacher's house." "Exactly. Nobody searches the place they think is beneath them." Emmett took the paper. "Marriage certificate, clear handwriting. Samuel James Rourke and Sarah Elizabeth Dawson. Witnessed by Elijah Boone and one other name." Emmett read it twice. "The other witness, Margaret Pruitt. Dr. Pruitt's wife. She died in '79, but the signature stands. Dr. Pruitt watched his own wife's friend die and did nothing. Dr. Pruitt watched the man who holds his mortgage tell him to stop delivering medicine, and he chose his house over his oath." Boone's voice carried no judgment, just fact, the way a man states the weather. "Most people choose their house, Emmett. That's not evil, it's just human. It killed my sister." "Yes, it did." Boone met his eyes. "And now the question is whether enough humans choose different this time." Thursday night. No moon. Emmett saddled 2 horses. Miguel appeared at the barn door. "You ain't going alone, boss." "I am." "No, sir, you ain't." Miguel pulled his own saddle off the rack. "I've been working this ranch 9 years. You're the only man ever paid me fair, and didn't call me boy. Whatever you're riding into tonight, I'm riding beside you." Emmett looked at him. 30 years old, wife and 2 sons at home, everything to lose. "Kincaid's place," Emmett said. "Behind the house. There's a bricked-over well." "I'll bring the sledgehammer." They rode east. 5 miles in the dark. The heat held even at midnight. Air thick and still. Emmett could hear his own heartbeat in his ears. Kincaid's property sat on a hill. White house. Wrap-around porch. Every window dark. The judge's carriage was in the barn. His horse in the paddock. He was home, sleeping. 40 yards from where they needed to be. They tied the horses in the creek bed a quarter-mile south and went on foot. Miguel carried the sledgehammer wrapped in a blanket to muffle the sound. Emmett carried a lantern he wouldn't light until they had to. The garden was behind the kitchen. Rose bushes in neat rows, and at the center the well, or what used to be the well. Now it was a raised brick platform with a stone planter on top. Red roses in full bloom. Even in the dark, Emmett could smell them, sweet and thick and wrong. He put his hand on the bricks. Cool even in July. The mortar was new. 6 months old, maybe less. Kincaid had bricked this over after Sarah died. "Quiet as we can," Emmett whispered. Miguel set the sledgehammer down, pulled a chisel from his belt, started working the mortar between the bricks. Slow, careful. The scraping sound seemed loud enough to wake the whole county, but the house stayed dark. Brick by brick. The mortar crumbled. Miguel pulled the first one free, then the second. Emmett took over, while Miguel rested his hands. They worked in shifts. 20 minutes. 30. The hole widened. Emmett reached in, felt open air below, the well shaft, deep and dry. He lit the lantern, held it over the opening. The light fell down into darkness. 10 feet. 12. At the bottom, dirt and dry leaves and something else. A glint of metal. "There," Emmett pointed. "Tin box." "I'll go down." Miguel was already tying the rope to the rose planter's stone base. "I'm lighter." "The hell you are. Boss, you're 50 years old with a bad knee. I'm 30 with 2 good ones. Let me do this." Emmett handed him the rope. Miguel went down hand over hand. Fast. Quiet. At the bottom, he grabbed the box, shook it. Something rattled inside. "Got it." He climbed back up, set the box on the ground between them. Emmett opened it. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, papers, a leather diary, a land deed, a marriage certificate, a will, and pressed between the pages of the diary dried wildflowers, purple and yellow, the kind that grew in the prairie grass every spring. Emmett opened the diary. First page. Sarah's handwriting. He recognized it. The same round letters she'd used as a girl, writing in her school tablets at the kitchen table while their mother cooked. The first entry was dated January 3, 1882. "If you're reading this, I'm dead. And if I'm dead, Harlan killed me. Not with his hands. He's too smart for that. He killed me by taking away everything that kept me alive. My medicine, my daughter's safety, my hope. He did it slowly and legally, and the whole county watched and called him a good man." Emmett's hands shook. Miguel crossed himself. A light came on in the house. "Move," Emmett hissed. They grabbed the box, the tools, everything, ran for the creek bed. Behind them, the kitchen door opened. Lamplight spilled across the garden. A voice, not Kincaid's, the housekeeper's. "Who's there?" They didn't stop, didn't look back, hit the creek bed at a dead run, found the horses, mounted, rode hard and fast with the tin box secured in Emmett's saddlebag. 2 miles out, Emmett slowed, listened. No hooves behind them, no lanterns on the road. They'd made it. Miguel was breathing hard. "He'll see the well in the morning." "I know. He'll know it was you." "I know that too." "What happens then?" Emmett touched the saddlebag. felt the hard edges of the tin box through the leather. His sister's last words. Her diary. Her truth. Buried in a dry well under roses planted by the man who let her die. Then he finds out what happens when a dead woman testifies. They rode home through the dark. The heat pressed down, but something had shifted. Something in Emmett's chest that had been locked for 12 years. He reached the ranch at 3 a.m, unsaddled the horses, walked inside, sat at the kitchen table, and opened the diary. He read until dawn. Every page, every entry. 6 months of Sarah's life. The medicine being withheld. The food getting smaller. Josie being locked in the root cellar for crying. The land deed being forged. Kincaid's meetings with Dr. Pruitt. Names, dates, times. Everything a dying woman could gather while her body failed and her mind stayed sharp. The last entry was dated March 29th, 2 weeks before she died. Josie knows where to find this. I've taught her. Every night I make her repeat it back to me. The well, the box, Emmett's name. She's 8, and she carries more than any child should. But she's strong. Dawson's strong. And when she finds her uncle when he reads these words, I need him to know one thing. I forgive him. I forgave him 12 years ago. I was just too proud to say it. Same as him. Same stubborn pride that runs in our blood like a river that won't change course. But Emmett, if you're reading this, the river's changed now. It changed the day I put this box in the ground. It changed because I chose to send my daughter to you instead of away from you. Please, be what I always knew you could be. Be her father. Be brave. Be better than we were. Emmett closed the diary, put his head on the table, pressed his forehead against the wood. The kitchen was quiet. First light coming through the window. Footsteps in the hall. Small. Careful. Josie appeared in the doorway. She saw the tin box on the table, the diary, the papers, her mother's handwriting. You found it, she said. Yeah. Did she say anything about me? Emmett lifted his head, looked at this girl, his niece, his sister's child. Standing in the doorway in a borrowed nightgown, barefoot, burned, scarred, 8 years old, and braver than every adult in Kiowa County combined. She said, you're Dawson strong. Josie's chin trembled. And she said she forgave me. Do you believe her? Emmett picked up the dried wildflowers from between the diary's pages, purple and yellow, the same kind his wife used to press in books, the same kind that grew every spring in the prairie grass, like a promise the earth kept making, whether anyone listened or not. Yeah, he said. I believe her. Josie walked to the table, sat down across from him, put her hands flat on the wood, the way she'd seen the adults do during their meetings. What now? She asked. Now we wait for Tom to get back from Topeka, and when he does, we take everything your mama gave us and we put it in front of a judge who isn't your stepfather. And if we lose, we won't. Mama said that too. Your mama didn't have what we have. What's that? Emmett looked at the diary, at the land deed, at the wildflowers, at the 8-year-old girl sitting across from him with her mother's eyes and her uncle's jaw, and the kind of stubborn that didn't bend, it just dug deeper. Proof, he said, and people willing to bleed for it. Josie nodded. She reached across the table and touched the diary, just her fingertips on the leather cover. Gentle, the way you touch something sacred. Mama, she whispered. So quiet Emmett almost didn't hear it. Then she pulled her hand back, straightened her shoulders, looked at him with those Dawson eyes that saw straight through pretense and fear and everything adults used to hide from the truth. Teach me the ranch today, she said. All of it. The books, the cattle counts, the money, everything. Why today? Because Mama spent her dying making sure I'd survive, and I'm not going to waste it sitting around being scared. Emmett stood up, poured 2 cups of coffee, set one in front of Josie. She took it with both hands, drank it black, didn't flinch at the bitter. Outside, the Kansas sun was climbing, already hot at 6 in the morning. The creek was lower than yesterday. The grass was browner. Somewhere east, a man in a black suit was about to walk into his garden and find a hole where his roses used to be. And somewhere on the road to Topeka, Tom Carruthers was writing with papers that could end a judge's career and save a dead woman's daughter. And at the kitchen table, a rancher and a girl drank bitter coffee and didn't talk about fear, because talking about it was a luxury they couldn't afford. They had work to do. Kincaid found the well at 7 in the morning. By 8, Deputy Jessup was at Emmett's gate. Emmett walked out to meet him. Didn't hurry. Didn't slow down. Just walked like a man who'd been expecting the knock. "Emmett?" Jessup didn't dismount. His hands were tight on the reins, and his jaw was working like he was chewing something he couldn't swallow. The judge filed a complaint. Trespassing. Destruction of property. Theft. Theft of what? He says personal documents were taken from a sealed structure on his property. Personal documents. Emmett let that sit. "You mean my dead sister's diary and her daughter's land deed? Those personal documents." Jessup closed his eyes, opened them. "I'm supposed to arrest you." "Then arrest me." "I'm supposed to." "I didn't say I was going to." Jessup leaned forward in the saddle. "Emmett, he's not just angry. I've never seen him like this. He called Dr. Pruitt at 6 this morning, called the county clerk, called 3 men I didn't recognize. He's building something. I don't know what, but he's moving fast. He's scared. Scared men with power are the most dangerous kind. You know that." "I do. He gave me till noon to bring you in. If I don't, he files for my removal and gets a territorial marshal sent from Dodge." "Then you better ride slow." Jessup looked at him. A long look. The look of a man standing on a line he'd been walking toward his whole life. "My wife's name is Ruth," Jessup said. "My oldest boy's 12. The twins are 7. If I lose this badge, we lose the house. The judge holds the deed." "I know. I'm telling you that, so you understand what I'm about to do." Jessup reached up and unpinned the badge from his chest, held it in his palm, looked at it, then put it in his pocket. "I'll ride slow, real slow. Might take me all day to get back to town. Might be my horse goes lame. Might be I don't find you at all." "Tom, don't thank me. I should have done this 2 years ago when I saw that girl carrying firewood barefoot." He pulled the horse around. "You got maybe 12 hours before the territorial marshal comes. Use them." He rode off. Emmett watched him go, then turned to the house. Josie was on the porch. Ada was beside her. Louisa was coming up the road on horseback riding hard. "He's moving," Louisa said before she dismounted. "Kincaid went to the telegraph office 20 minutes ago. Sent 4 wires. I couldn't see where. Topeka. Dodge. Maybe Wichita." Ada's voice was tight. "He's calling in favors. Lawyers. Marshals. Anyone who owes him." "How much time do we have?" Louisa asked. 12 hours, maybe less. Tom's not back yet." "I know." Josie stood up from the porch step. "What happens if the marshal gets here before Tom gets back?" Nobody answered. That was answer enough. "Then we need the diary," Josie said. "We need to use what Mama wrote, right now, today. We can't wait for Topeka." "The diary's not enough on its own," Ada said. "It's a dead woman's word against a living judge. Without the federal filing, without a different court, Kincaid controls the hearing. Then we take it to someone Kincaid can't control." Everyone looked at Josie. "The newspaper," she said. "Mama used to read me the Dodge City Times. She said the pen was the one weapon judges couldn't confiscate." Ada and Louisa exchanged a look. Emmett felt something in his chest he hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride exactly. Something sharper. Recognition. This girl wasn't just surviving, she was fighting. "The editor of the Dodge City Times is Frank Colton," Ada said slowly. "I've handled his mail for 10 years. He's run stories against the railroads, the cattle barons, the territorial governor. He's honest." Dodge is 60 miles, Emmett said. I can ride it in a day. Ada stood up, straightened her skirt. 62 years old, gray hair, bad hip, and eyes like cut glass. Give me the diary. Give me Sarah's letters. Give me copies of the land deed. I'll be in Colton's office by sundown. Ada, if Kincaid finds out, he'll threaten my mail route. I've run that post office since before he passed the bar. Let him try. She held out her hand. The diary, Emmett. Now. While we still have roads, he isn't watching. Emmett went inside, came back with the tin box. He opened it on the porch, pulled out the diary and the copies of the land deed Ada had made yesterday. Held them. His sister's words. The last 6 months of her life pressed between leather covers. Her handwriting. Her fear. Her courage. All of it about to ride 60 miles in a saddlebag to a newspaper office. He handed them over. Ada tucked them inside her coat, buttoned it, looked at Josie. Your mama would be proud of you. My mama would be alive if people had been proud of her sooner. Ada flinched, took the hit, nodded. Then she mounted her horse and rode west toward Dodge City without looking back. 2 hours passed. Emmett put Josie to work. Not to distract her, because work was the only honest thing he had to offer while they waited. They mucked stalls, they checked water troughs, they counted cattle. Josie moved through it steady-focused, like she'd decided that if the world was going to fall apart, she'd at least have clean stalls when it did. Miguel found them at the south fence. Rider coming from the east, boss. Fast. Emmett's hand went to the rifle on his saddle. Then he saw the horse. A bay gelding, sweat-darkened legs caked with dust. The rider was leaning forward, pushing hard. Tom Carruthers. He pulled up at the gate and nearly fell off the horse. He'd ridden 300 miles in 8 days. His face was burned. His lips were cracked. His hands were raw from the reins, but his eyes were alive. I filed, Tom said. Federal Court, Topeka. Judge Raymond Walsh accepted the petition. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a document. Territorial seal, federal stamp. Emmett. Walsh didn't just accept it, he expedited it. When he read Ada's affidavit about the intercepted mail, he called it obstruction of federal correspondence. That's a felony. He's sending a federal marshal. When? Already sent. Left Topeka 2 days after me. He's taking the southern route through Wichita. Should be here in 3 days, maybe 4. We don't have 3 days. Kincaid's got a territorial marshal coming from Dodge. Could be here by tonight. Tom's face fell. Then we got a race. Between 2 marshals. Between 2 versions of the law. Louisa brought Tom water. He drank it in one go. His hands were shaking. Not from drink, from exhaustion. From 8 days of hard riding through Kansas, heat-carrying papers that could end a judge's career and save a girl's life. Tom. Emmett gripped his shoulder. You did good. I kept my promise. Tom's voice cracked. Told Sarah I'd remember. I remembered. Josie walked over, looked at Tom. This man she'd never met who'd ridden 300 miles because her dead mother once walked into his saloon and trusted him with the truth. Thank you, she said. Tom looked down at her. His eyes filled. You look like her. Same eyes, same way of standing like you're about to fight something. I am about to fight something. I know, sweetheart. That's why I rode. Noon passed. The heat was brutal, the worst day of the summer so far. Emmett kept checking the east road. Nothing yet. The territorial marshal from Dodge would come that way. 1 o'clock, 2. The air was so still the windmill stopped turning. At 3, Reverend Boone rode in. He was sweating through his shirt, which Emmett had never seen before. Boone carried himself like heat was something that happened to other people. Emmett, we got trouble that ain't legal. What kind? The grass kind. Boone pointed south. Fire. Started 2 hours ago on the Miller property. Winds pushing it north. Straight for your south pasture. Emmett climbed the windmill ladder, looked south, saw it. A dark line on the horizon. Smoke rising thick and yellow against the white sky. Prairie fire. In this drought, with this heat on grass, this dry, it would move fast. "How far?" he called down. 4 miles, maybe 5, moving quick." "That's not natural," Louisa said. "Miller's place is bare dirt, nothing to burn. He plowed his fields under last month." Everyone went quiet, the same thought hitting at the same time. "Kincaid." Emmett climbed down. His boots hit the ground hard. He said it. "You can't prove that," Boone said. "Don't need to prove it. Need to survive it." Emmett turned to Miguel. "Get every hand, wet blankets, shovels. We dig a fire break along the south fence. Move the cattle north to the creek bed." "Boss, the creek's almost dry." "Almost ain't empty. Move them." Miguel ran. Emmett grabbed Josie's shoulders, crouched down. "Listen to me. You stay with Louisa. You go to the creek bed with the cattle. You do not come back to this house until I come get you." "I can help." "You can help by staying alive. That's your job right now." Emmett. "Josie, your mama didn't walk 2 miles to a doctor who wouldn't help and hide evidence in a well and spend her dying making sure you survived just so you could run into a fire to prove you're brave. You're already brave. Now be smart." Her jaw locked. She wanted to argue. He could see it in every muscle, but she nodded. "Don't die," she said. "I ain't planning on it." Louisa took Josie and rode north. Emmett watched them go. Then he turned south. The smoke was thicker now. He could smell it. Dry grass and heat and something underneath. Coal oil. Someone had used accelerant. 20 men dug the fire break. Ranch hands, neighbors, 3 men from town who'd ridden out when they saw the smoke. Emmett swung a shovel until his hands bled. Boone worked beside him, coat off sleeves rolled, digging with the strength of a man who'd charged Confederate lines at 19 and wasn't about to let a fire take what a war couldn't. The fire hit the south fence at 4:30. The heat of it was alive. It ate the dry grass in rolling waves, 30 feet high, in places the sound of it like 100 trains. Fence posts exploded. Wire glowed red and snapped. Sparks flew across the fire break and landed in the north grass. "Wet blankets," Emmett yelled. "Beat them out?" They fought it with shovels and wet wool and bare hands. An hour. 2. The smoke turned the sun red and then erased it entirely. Men worked, blind, choking eyes streaming. One ranch hand went down with burns on his arms. Miguel dragged him clear. At 6 o'clock the wind shifted. Southwest to northwest. The fire turned east away from the ranch toward open prairie, where nothing lived and nothing would burn except grass. Emmett dropped to his knees, coughing. His hands were black. His shirt was burned through in 3 places. Beside him, Boone sat in the dirt breathing hard blood running from a cut on his forehead where a flying ember had struck. "We held," Boone said. "Yeah. That fire was set, Emmett." "I know. A man who'd burn 1,000 acres to cover a custody claim." Boone shook his head. "I fought men like that in the war. They didn't wear gray. They wore whatever uniform was winning." Emmett stood, looked south. His south pasture was gone. Black earth, smoking fence posts, 30 head of cattle unaccounted for, months of grass destroyed. The land would take 2 years to recover, but the house stood. The barn stood. The north pasture was untouched, and somewhere in the creek bed a girl was alive. He found Josie at dusk. She was sitting on the bank with Louisa, feet in the shallow water watching the smoke drift east. When she saw him, she stood up, looked at his burned hands, his blackened face, the holes in his shirt. "You didn't die," she said. "Told you I wasn't planning on it." "You look terrible. Feel worse." She almost smiled. Almost. Then her face went serious. "Was it him?" "Can't prove it." "But it was." "Yeah, it was. He burned Mama's house too, after she died, said it was an accident. Candle in the kitchen. But I was in that house. There were no candles. Mama couldn't afford candles. We used tallow lamps. Josie's voice was flat, the tone of a child listing facts she'd carried alone for too long. He burned everything. Her clothes, her books, the quilt her mother made, everything except what was in the well. Emmett sat down on the creek bank. His body hurt everywhere. His hands were raw. His lungs burned from the smoke. But something in him was harder now, tempered, the way metal gets stronger after fire. "He's trying to scare us," Emmett said. "Is it working?" He looked at his burned hands, at the smoke still drifting across the southern sky, at the black earth where his pasture used to be. "No," he said, "it ain't." They rode home in the dark. The ranch smelled of smoke and wet earth where they'd beaten out the embers. Miguel had the cattle count by lantern light. 72 out of 100. 28 missing, probably scattered south. They'd look in the morning. Emmett sat at the kitchen table, too tired to eat, too angry to sleep. Louisa cleaned and wrapped his hands. The burns stung when she applied the salve. He didn't flinch. "He went after your livelihood," Louisa said. "The cattle, the grass, that's your income. He wants me broke before the hearing. Can't fight a judge if you can't afford a lawyer." "Can you afford one?" The ranch hand fund covered the lawyer and Helena. The fire just ate 3 months of profit. Emmett flexed his bandaged hands. "But the house is standing, the herd's mostly intact, and I got something Kincaid doesn't." "What's that?" People who showed up with shovels. A knock at the door, past midnight. Emmett reached for the rifle. "It's me." Jessup's voice. Low. Urgent. "Open up." Emmett opened the door. Jessup was in civilian clothes. No badge. His face was pale in the lamplight. Territorial Marshal arrived in town an hour ago. Man named Briggs. Big. Mean-looking. He's at the hotel. He's got orders to arrest you in the morning on trespassing charges and remove Josie to Kincaid's custody. Tomorrow morning. First light. He's bringing 4 men. 4 men to arrest 1 rancher and take 1 little girl. Kincaid's not taking chances. Jessup shifted on his feet. "There's more. Briggs has a second warrant. For Louisa. Immigration fraud." Louisa, standing behind Emmett, went rigid. "My papers are legal," she said. "I know, but Kincaid filed a challenge. Says your naturalization documents have irregularities. Briggs has orders to detain you pending review." Jessup looked at her. "It's garbage. Won't hold up, but it'll hold you in a cell for 72 hours, long enough for the custody hearing to happen without your testimony." "He's removing the witnesses," Emmett said. "One by one. Ada's out of town. Louisa gets detained. Tom's a known drunk, easy to discredit. Boone's a black preacher in Kansas. No jury in the territory takes his word over a white judge's." Jessup's voice was bitter. "He's not just fighting you, Emmett. He's dismantling everyone around you." "The federal marshal," Emmett said. "Tom said he's 3 days out." "Briggs is here now. 3 days might as well be 3 years. Josie appeared in the hallway. She'd been listening. "The diary," she said. "Ada has the diary." "Ada's in Dodge City," Louisa said. "Then the newspaper prints it before Briggs gets here. That's the whole point. Once it's published, Kincaid can't bury it, can't burn it, can't file it away. Mama's words go everywhere." "Ada left 8 hours ago," Emmett said. "She's in Dodge by now. If Colton runs it." "If," Jessup said. "That's a big if. Colton's honest, but he's also careful. He'll want to verify, check sources. That takes time." "We don't have time." "I know." The kitchen went quiet. Everyone calculating, everyone running out of options. Then Tom Carruthers spoke. He'd been sitting in the corner so still they'd forgotten he was there. 8 days of hard riding, and he still hadn't slept. "I got one more thing," Tom said. "Didn't want to say it in front of everyone, but now I got to." "Say it." Tom reached into his coat, pulled out a second document, smaller, folded tight. He set it on the table and unfolded it with hands that didn't shake at all. "In Topeka, after I filed with Judge Walsh, his clerk pulled me aside. 'Young man, Said he recognized the name Kincaid. Said a complaint had been filed against Judge Harlan Kincaid 3 years ago from a woman in Wichita. Everyone stopped breathing. "What kind of complaint?" Emmett asked. "Same as Sarah's. Woman named Ellen Marsh, widow, married Kincaid in '76. He was her second husband. She had a son from her first marriage. Boy named Daniel, 14 years old." Tom's finger tapped the paper. Ellen died of consumption in '79. Kincaid was appointed guardian of the boy. Took control of the estate. Land, cash, everything. The boy ran away 6 months later. Ended up in a Wichita boarding house. Told the owner he'd been beaten, starved, locked in a cellar. Josie made a sound. Small. Strangled. Emmett looked at her. She was gripping the door frame. "The cellar," she whispered. "He locked me in the cellar, too." The boarding house owner filed a complaint with the federal court, Tom continued. It was assigned to a clerk. The clerk sent it to the territorial judge for Kiowa County for local review. Which territorial judge? Kincaid. He reviewed his own complaint. Dismissed it. Insufficient evidence. The boy Daniel Marsh disappeared 3 months later. Nobody's seen him since. The room was cold despite the July heat. Cold in the way that truth makes a room cold when the truth is worse than anyone imagined. "He's done this before," Louisa said. "At least twice," Tom said. "Ellen Marsh and Sarah. 2 wives, 2 estates, 2 children." He looked at Josie. "Maybe more. The clerk said the records were incomplete, like someone had pulled files." Kincaid cleaned his own records. "That's what the clerk believed. That's why he pulled me aside. He'd been waiting 3 years for someone to come asking the right questions." Emmett put his palms flat on the table. The bandages pressed against the wood. The burns throbbed. "Tom, this document, is it admissible?" "It's a certified copy of the original complaint. Federal seal. Walsh's clerk signed off on it." Tom's eyes were clear. Clearer than Emmett had ever seen them. "This isn't just Sarah anymore, Emmett. This is a pattern. 2 dead wives, 2 stolen estates, a missing boy, and a judge who investigated himself and found nothing wrong." "The federal marshal," Emmett said. "When he gets here, he gets all of this. The diary, the letters, the land deed, the Marsh complaint, everything." "If we're still standing when he gets here," Jessup said, "we'll be standing." "Emmett, Briggs is coming at dawn with 4 men and 2 warrants. How exactly do you plan to be standing?" Emmett looked at the people in his kitchen. Louisa with her documented injuries and her threatened papers. Tom with his 8 days of riding and his 3-year-old complaint from a missing boy. Jessup with his badge in his pocket and his family on the line. And Josie in the doorway, 8 years old, holding the frame like it was the only solid thing left. "Reverend Boone's church," Emmett said. "Territorial law says a church is sanctuary. A marshal can't execute a civil warrant on church property without a judge's direct order. Kincaid will give that order in 5 minutes. Kincaid's a county judge. Briggs carries territorial warrants. County jurisdiction doesn't extend to territorial enforcement on church-designated sanctuary." Emmett looked at Jessup. "You know I'm right." Jessup's mouth opened, closed. He thought about it. "It's a gray area. Gray is all we got. Gray buys us time. Time is all we need. How much time? 3 days, till the federal marshal arrives. Once federal jurisdiction overrides territorial Briggs's warrants are waste paper. And if Boone won't do it, that's his church, his livelihood. Kincaid's already threatened his land grant. He'll do it." Josie's voice, clear, certain. Everyone looked at her. "He fought in the war. He built that church with his hands. A man who builds something with his own hands doesn't let another man tear it down, not without a fight." Jessup stared at this girl. This 8-year-old girl who read people the way her uncle read cattle, by sound, by instinct, by something deeper than logic. "I'll ride to Boone's place," Jessup said. "Ask him myself." "You're risking everything." I risked everything when I put my badge in my pocket. Might as well ride the horse I saddled." He left. The door closed. The night pressed in. Emmett turned to Louisa. "You should go. If Briggs has your warrant being here, put you in a cell." "I'm not going." "Louisa, if they arrest you, you can't testify. You can't help Josie. You can't do anything from inside a jail." "Then I go to Ada. In Dodge. 2 birds. I verify the newspaper is running the story, and I stay out of Briggs's reach." Louisa was already moving, grabbing her bag. "I'll take the West Road. Nobody watches the West Road." "If Kincaid thinks I'm a Mexican midwife who's too scared to act. Let him keep thinking that." She paused at the door. "Emmett, when I delivered Josie, Sarah held my hand through 19 hours of labor. Never screamed, never cursed, just held on and breathed and said, 'She's going to be strong, Louisa. I can already feel it.' She was right." Louisa rode out. Into the dark. West toward Dodge City, carrying testimony in her head that no warrant could confiscate. The house was quiet. Tom had fallen asleep at the table, his head on his arms, exhausted. Miguel stood guard on the porch with a rifle he'd never had to fire at a person and was praying he wouldn't start tonight. Emmett sat with Josie in the front room. She'd refused to go to bed. "Tell me about Mama," she said. "Before, when she was little." Emmett leaned back. His burns ached. His throat was raw from smoke. But the girl was asking, and he owed her more answers than excuses. "She used to steal apples from the Hendersons' orchard. Every September, she'd fill her skirt with them and run home, and your grandmother would pretend to be angry, but she'd bake a pie with every one." Josie's mouth twitched. "She could ride before she could read. Our father put her on a horse at 3. She fell off 17 times the first week. Got back on 18. Dawson strong. Dawson stubborn. Same thing, different word." Emmett paused. "She sang off key. Terrible. Couldn't carry a tune in a bucket. But she sang anyway, loudest in church. The Reverend before Boone used to wince every Sunday." Josie laughed. Just a breath of it. Quick. Like she'd surprised herself. "She taught me to swim," Emmett said. And then he stopped. Because swimming was the creek, and the creek was Henry, and Henry was the door at the end of the hall, and the room he'd sealed shut for 4 years. "Your son," Josie said. "He drowned." "Yeah." "How old?" 5. That's how old I was when the judge first hit me. The parallel landed like a hammer on a nail. 2 children. 2 kinds of loss. One taken by water. One beaten by a man who called himself father. "What was his name?" Josie asked. "Henry." "Henry Dawson." "Yeah. If he'd lived, he'd be my cousin." "Yeah, he would." Josie was quiet for a long time. Then she reached over and took Emmett's bandaged hand. Held it the way you hold something wounded. "I think Mama sent me here for you too," she said. "Not just for me. She knew you were alone. She knew about Henry. She knew this house was quiet and you were dying in it the slow way. The way she was dying. Just without the cough." Emmett couldn't speak. "She saved us both," Josie said. "That's what mamas do." 3 in the morning. Hoofbeats on the road. Fast. Coming from the south. Miguel cocked the rifle. Jessup's voice in the dark. "It's me. Don't shoot." He dismounted hard. Nearly ran to the porch. "Boone says yes. The church is open. He'll ring the bell at dawn. Anyone who wants sanctuary walks through those doors, and the territorial marshal can stand outside till his boots rot." Jessup was breathing hard. "But there's something else." "What?" "On my way back I cut through town. Briggs was at the hotel bar. Drinking. Talking loud. I stayed outside the window and listened. And Kincaid's changed the plan. He's not waiting for morning. Briggs rides at 4, 1 hour from now." Emmett's blood went cold. "He's coming here. Tonight. For Josie." Jessup nodded. 4 men. armed. And Briggs has got a wagon. A locked wagon. The kind they use to transport prisoners. For an 8-year-old girl. For anyone Kincaid wants gone. Emmett turned to Josie. She was already standing, already pulling on her boots. Her face was pale, but her hands were steady. "The church," she said. "The church." Tom woke up. Miguel grabbed the horses. Emmett lifted Josie onto Copper's back. The mare was calm, patient, like she knew. "Everybody rides," Emmett said. "Emmett, Tom, Miguel, Josie on Copper. Jessup, you know the back roads better than anyone." "I'll lead. There's a path through the Miller property, through the burned land. Nobody's going to be watching ground that's already destroyed. Through the fire. Through what's left of it." They rode. 5 riders in the dark. Through black earth still warm from the fire. Ash rising under the hooves. The smell of it everywhere. Destruction that Kincaid had ordered and God hadn't stopped, and the prairie would spend 2 years forgiving. Josie rode Copper in the middle. Didn't make a sound. Emmett rode beside her, close enough to touch. "Emmett," she whispered. "Yeah. If he catches us. If the marshal takes me. I want you to know something. He ain't taking you. If he does." She looked at him in the dark. Those eyes. His mother's eyes. His sister's eyes. "Mama told me to tell you she sang your lullaby to me, every night. The one your mother sang to both of you. She said you'd know which one." Emmett's vision blurred, his throat sealed shut. The lullaby, their mother's song, the one Sarah used to sing off-key and terribly and with all her heart. "She never stopped being your sister," Josie said. "Even when you stopped being her brother." They rode through the ashes of his burned pasture, through the evidence of a man's cruelty, through the dark, toward a church built by a soldier's hands. And Emmett Dawson held the reins, and held his grief, and held on to the only thing that mattered. The bell tower appeared against the gray sky. Boone was standing at the door, lantern in his hand. The church was open, the pews were empty. The cross on the wall caught the lantern light. "Get inside," Boone said. "All of you." They dismounted. Josie walked through the church doors first, small, straight-backed. Her boots echoed on the wood floor. Boone looked at Emmett. "I rang the bell 10 minutes ago. If anyone in this county has ears and a conscience, they heard it. And if they don't come, then it's just us. And that's enough. It's always been enough." They went inside. Boone closed the doors, dropped the bar. Outside, the Kansas sky was turning gray. Dawn was coming. And with it, a territorial marshal with 4 armed men and a locked wagon and warrants signed by a judge who'd killed 2 wives and stolen 2 children's lives and was about to find out that the 3rd time the dead woman's truth got out of the well before he could brick it over. Emmett sat in the front pew, Josie beside him, her hand in his, small, warm. "Papa Cal," she said. He looked at her. She hadn't meant to say it. He could see that in her face. It had slipped out. The way truth does when you stop guarding it. "Papa Cal," she said again, testing it, deciding. "Is that okay?" His throat wouldn't work. His eyes burned. His bandaged hands shook. "Yeah," he managed. "That's okay." She leaned against his arm, closed her eyes. And in the sanctuary of a church, built by a man who'd survived a war, surrounded by people who'd chosen conscience over comfort. Josie Rourke Dawson fell asleep beside the uncle who'd failed her mother and was trying with everything he had left not to fail her. Briggs arrived at 6. Emmett heard the horses first. Heavy hooves on packed dirt. Multiple riders. The sound of authority coming to collect what it believed it owned. He stood. Josie woke instantly. The sleep of a hunted child never deep enough to miss danger. "They're here," she said. "Stay behind me." Boone moved to the doors. Didn't open them. Just stood there, solid, both hands on the wooden bar. Outside, a voice. Deep. Official. This is Territorial Marshal Briggs. I hold warrants for the arrest of Emmett Dawson and the recovery of the minor child Josephine Kincaid. Open these doors. Boone answered without moving. This is a house of God, Marshal. Sanctuary law applies. You got no authority to execute civil warrants on consecrated ground. Sanctuary law is Catholic doctrine, preacher. This ain't a Catholic church. Sanctuary is older than any denomination, and this door stays shut. Silence. Then boots on the wooden steps. Heavy, deliberate. A fist hit the door. Once, twice. The wood shuddered. Mr. Dawson, Briggs's voice came through the planks. You're making this worse for yourself. Come out peacefully. Bring the child. Nobody gets hurt. Emmett walked to the door, put his mouth close to the crack. Marshal, that child has belt marks on her back and cigar burns on her arms. The man who signed your warrants put them there. Before you break down a church door, I'd ask you to think about whose side of history you want to be on. Quiet. A long one. Then Briggs lower. I got orders, Mr. Dawson. I don't get to pick sides. Everybody picks sides, so you're just pretending you haven't. More silence. Then Briggs stepped back off the porch. Emmett couldn't see, but he could hear the man's boots in the dirt. Heard him talking to his men. Low. The words didn't carry, but the tone did. Uncertain. Tom moved to the side window, peeked through the gap in the shutters. 4 men on horseback, Briggs on the porch, the locked wagons parked by the cemetery fence. Tom looked back. There's somebody in the wagon already. Can't see who. Louisa. Emmett's gut dropped. He got Louisa. She rode for Dodge, Josie said. He couldn't have. He's got people on every road. She wouldn't have made it past Coldwater. Josie's face went white. Then it hardened. The transformation of a child who'd watched adults fail her so many times that fear had become just another thing to work through. The diary, Josie said. If Louisa didn't reach Dodge, Ada doesn't have backup testimony. And if Kincaid intercepted Louisa, he knows about the newspaper. He knows everything, Tom said quietly. He's always known everything. Not everything, Reverend Boone's voice. Calm. He turned to Emmett. He doesn't know about the Marsh complaint. Tom brought that from Topeka. Nobody's seen it but us. That document proves pattern, Emmett said. 2 wives, 2 estates, a missing boy. But it's useless if we can't get it in front of a judge. Then we stall. Boone looked at the church doors. We stall until the federal marshal gets here. Briggs will break the door down. Let him try. Every hour he stands out there arguing with a preacher is an hour the federal marshal gets closer. 8 o'clock. Briggs hadn't left. Hadn't broken in either. He sat on the church steps smoking. His men watered their horses at the trough. Professional. Patient. In no rush. They had the building surrounded and time on their side. Inside, the heat built. The church had no ventilation worth mentioning. By 9, it was stifling. Josie sat in the front pew, sweat running down her face, reading the Bible because it was the only book available. Tom paced. Miguel stood at the back door with his rifle. Jessup sat in the corner, working through the legal arguments in his head, muttering precedents to himself. At 10 hoofbeats, coming from the west, fast. Tom looked through the window. Kincaid. The judge's carriage pulled up beside the locked wagon. Kincaid stepped out. Black suit, gold chain. He walked to Briggs, spoke briefly, then turned toward the church. Mr. Dawson. His voice carried through the walls. Clean, controlled. The voice of a man accustomed to rooms going quiet when he spoke. This has gone far enough. You're in a church with a child, 2 fugitives, and a disgraced deputy. The law is not on your side. It never was. Emmett didn't answer. I'm prepared to be generous, Kincaid continued. Come out now. Return Josie to my custody. I'll drop the trespassing charges. I'll release Miss Garza. Mr. Carruthers can return to his saloon, The preacher keeps his church. Everyone goes home. Except Josie, Emmett said through the door. Josie goes with her legal guardian, as the law requires. You ain't her guardian, you're her jailer. The court says otherwise. Your court, your bench, your verdict, that ain't law, that's theater. Kincaid was quiet for 10 seconds. When he spoke again, the warmth was gone. I tried courtesy. Now, let me try clarity. Marshal Briggs has authorization to breach this building if its occupants refuse to comply with lawful orders. I've just signed that authorization. You have 30 minutes. Footsteps retreating. The carriage door closing. 30 minutes. Tom sat down hard. That's it then. That ain't it. Josie stood up from the pew. It's not it until we say it is. Sweetheart, he's got 4 armed men and a marshal and we've got my mama's diary, and a federal complaint, and a preacher who built this church with his hands, and a postmistress who's either in Dodge City or dead in a ditch, and I am 8 years old, and I am tired of running. The church went silent. Every adult in the room looking at this girl who weighed 60 pounds and burned hotter than any of them. She's right, Boone said. We don't run. We open the doors. Open them, Emmett said. Open them. Walk out, all of us, in front of whoever's watching. Boone moved toward the doors. Kincaid wants this quiet, wants it legal, wants it clean. So we make it loud, we make it public. We walk out there with our heads up and we tell every person within earshot what this man did to 2 women and 3 children. He'll arrest us, Tom said. Let him. Let him arrest a preacher and a rancher and a drunk and a girl in front of the whole town. Let people see what the law looks like when it's being used as a weapon. People have seen that before, Emmett said. They looked away. Maybe, but I rang that bell at dawn, and I ain't the only one who heard it. Emmett looked at Josie. She looked back. Those eyes, Dawson eyes. Fire in them now. Open the doors, Emmett said. Boone lifted the bar, pulled the doors wide. Sunlight flooded the church. Emmett squinted. Then his eyes adjusted, and he saw it. People. Not just Briggs and his 4 men in Kincaid's carriage. 30 people, maybe more, standing in the churchyard. Farmers, ranchers, women in aprons who'd left their kitchens. Jenkins and his wife. 3 ranch families from the valley. Miguel's wife holding their youngest son. Old Mrs. Henderson, who hadn't left her property in 2 years. They'd heard the bell. Boone walked out first, stood on the church steps. Emmett came behind. Josie held his hand. Tom and Jessup followed. Briggs looked at the crowd, then at Kincaid. Something in his face shifted. 30 witnesses changed the math. Kincaid stepped out of his carriage. His eyes swept the crowd, calculating. Always calculating. Marshal Briggs, execute your warrants. Briggs didn't move. Marshal. Judge, there's 30 citizens standing here. I'd like to proceed with... You'd like to proceed with your duty, which is to enforce the warrants I signed. Emmett stepped forward, raised his voice so every person in the yard could hear. These folks deserve to know what they're witnessing. Judge Harlan Kincaid married my sister Sarah 12 years ago. He beat her stepdaughter with a belt. He burned her arms with cigars. When Sarah tried to get help, he intercepted her letters to the governor. When she got sick, he canceled her medicine. He watched her die. Then he filed guardianship papers 2 days later and started stealing her daughter's inheritance. The crowd shifted, murmurs running through like wind through grass. That's a lie, Kincaid said. Smooth. Fast. This man is a grieving bachelor projecting his loss onto. I got proof. Emmett held up the federal complaint. Ellen Marsh, Wichita, 1879. Same pattern, same man. Married a widow. She died of consumption. He took the estate. The boy ran away, filed a complaint, and Judge Kincaid dismissed it because it was assigned to his own bench. The crowd went quiet. Not murmuring quiet. Still quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when people realize they've been standing next to a snake and calling it a neighbor. That document is stolen, Kincaid said. Obtained illegally from... It's a certified copy from the federal court in Topeka. Tom stepped forward. I rode 300 miles to get it. Judge Raymond Walsh signed off on it personally. A federal investigation is already underway. Kincaid's hand went to his watch chain, clicked the watch open, closed. The tell. The one thing he couldn't control. Furthermore, Emmett's voice carried across the yard. My sister Sarah hid a diary before she died. 6 months of entries. Every beating, every threat, every document Kincaid forged. She buried it in a well on Kincaid's property because it was the only safe place in her world. We recovered it. It's on its way to the Dodge City Times right now. Kincaid's face changed. For the first time in Emmett's memory, the mask slipped. Not rage, not fear. Something worse. The look of a man who'd controlled every variable for 15 years and was watching them scatter. Marshal Briggs. Kincaid's voice came out tight. Arrest this man. Now. Briggs looked at Kincaid, looked at the crowd, looked at Josie standing beside Emmett, small and straight-backed, and looking directly at him with eyes that asked one question. Marshal, Josie said, did you look in his wagon? Briggs frowned. What? The locked wagon. Did you look inside because there's a woman in there? Luisa Garza. She delivered me when I was born. She's the one who documented my injuries, and the judge locked her up to keep her quiet. Briggs turned to the wagon, walked over. He tried the handle. Locked. Open it, Briggs said to his men. That wagon is county property under my authority, Kincaid said. You have no cow. Open it. One of Briggs's men broke the lock. The door swung open. Louisa was inside, hands bound, a bruise on her cheek that hadn't been there yesterday. She squinted against the sunlight, found Emmett in the crowd. I didn't make it to Dodge, she said. Her voice was hoarse. They caught me on the Coldwater Road. 2 of the judge's men brought me here. The crowd erupted. Mrs. Jenkins covered her mouth. Jenkins took a step toward Kincaid, fists clenched, and his wife grabbed his arm. 3 ranch hands moved closer, instinctive, forming a line between Kincaid and the church. That woman is being detained under lawful... There ain't nothing lawful about binding a woman's hands and throwing her in a wagon. It was old Mrs. Henderson, 80 years old, hadn't raised her voice in a decade. Harlan Kincaid, I knew your first wife. I knew Ellen Marsh. I watched her waste away in that house, and I told myself it wasn't my business. I have carried that sin every day since. The crowd went quiet again, listening. I won't carry it again. Henderson's voice shook but held. Not for you. Not for any man. Kincaid looked at the crowd, at the faces that had trusted him, feared him, obeyed him for 15 years. And for the first time, those faces weren't looking away. This is mob rule, Kincaid said. This is a town waking up. Reverend Boone's voice cut through. Something that should have happened a long time ago. A horse on the road. Coming from the south. Fast. Everyone turned. A rider in a dusty coat badge on his chest. Not Briggs's star. Different. Federal Eagle. Behind him 2 more riders. The federal marshal from Topeka. He pulled up his horse, dismounted, looked at the crowd, the church, the locked wagon, the bound woman, and Kincaid standing in the middle of it all in his pressed black suit. I'm Marshal Coulter, federal jurisdiction. I hold warrants for the arrest of Judge Harlan Kincaid on charges of mail tampering, obstruction of federal correspondence, fraud, forgery, and criminal guardianship abuse. The sound that came from the crowd wasn't a cheer. It was a breath. 60 people exhaling at the same time. Coulter walked to Kincaid. Steady, unhurried. Judge Kincaid, you're under federal arrest. Kincaid's hand went to his watch chain one last time, clicked the watch open, read whatever was engraved inside, the words he lived by. Whatever they were, they hadn't saved him. The watch snapped shut. I want a lawyer, Kincaid said. You'll have one, in Topeka. The handcuffs clicked. The sound of them carried across the yard. Metal on metal. Final. Josie watched, didn't move, didn't flinch. 8 years old, standing in the churchyard in borrowed clothes, watching the man who'd burned her mother's house and stolen her land and locked her in a cellar and told her she was too expensive to keep. She watched him walk to the federal wagon, watched him climb in, watched the door close. Then she looked up at Emmett. "Is it over?" she asked. "The arrest is." "What about the rest?" "The rest takes longer. Court, testimony, paperwork." "Mama's diary." "That'll speak for her." Josie nodded. Then she did something she hadn't done since she arrived at Emmett's gate half dead in the July heat. She leaned into him, put her face against his chest, wrapped her arms around his waist, and held on. Not crying, not shaking, just holding. The way you hold something when you've been carrying yourself alone for so long that the act of leaning is harder than standing. Emmett put his arms around her, his bandaged hands on her small back, his chin on top of her head. The crowd watched, some of them crying. Jenkins's wife openly, Mrs. Henderson pressing a handkerchief to her face. Even Briggs, the territorial marshal, who'd come to take a child in a locked wagon, stood with his hat in his hands, looking like a man reconsidering every order he'd ever followed without question. Louisa climbed out of the wagon. Her wrists were raw from the bindings. The bruise on her cheek was darkening. She walked straight to Josie, knelt down. "I'm sorry I got caught, mija. You came back. That's what matters." Ada Whitfield rode in an hour later, dusty, exhausted, but her saddlebag was empty. "Colton ran it," she said. "The diary, Sarah's letters, everything, morning edition. It's already on the telegraph wire to Wichita and Topeka." He believed it. He read the first 3 pages of Sarah's diary and wept at his desk, said it was the most important story he'd publish in 30 years of journalism. Ada dismounted, looked at the crowd, at Kincaid's empty carriage, at the federal marshals loading evidence. "Did I miss it?" "You didn't miss anything," Emmett said. "You made it happen." That afternoon, Federal Marshal Coulter took testimony. In the church. Boone cleared the pews and Coulter sat at a table, and one by one they came. Rosa Chen wasn't in this story, but other women were. Mrs. Henderson, who'd known Ellen Marsh, a woman from Coldwater who'd worked in Kincaid's house and seen things she'd been paid to forget. Dr. Pruitt's widow's sister, who had letters Margaret Pruitt had written before she died, describing what she'd witnessed at the Kincaid property. And Josie, last, smallest, steadiest. She sat across from Marshal Coulter and told him everything. The belt, the cellar, the cigar burns, the medicine that stopped coming, the night her mother climbed out of bed and lowered a box into the well, the wagon ride to Wichita that she escaped, the 20-mile walk through Kansas heat. Coulter was a man who'd spent 20 years enforcing federal law. He'd arrested rustlers and murderers and corrupt officials. His hands were steady and his voice never wavered. When Josie finished, his hands weren't steady anymore. "Miss Rourke," he said, using her real name, her father's name, the name Kincaid had buried. "You are the bravest witness I've ever had the privilege of hearing." "I'm not brave," Josie said. "I'm just tired of being quiet." Coulter looked at Emmett. "Mr. Dawson, I'm recommending full federal custody transfer to you pending formal adoption proceedings. The territorial guardianship order is void. Kincaid's judicial authority is suspended." "The land," Emmett said. "Josie's land, Samuel Rourke's claim. Restored, in full, with damages." Coulter gathered his papers. "Kincaid will face trial in Topeka, federal charges. He won't see Kansas again except in chains." Josie took Emmett's hand, held it tight, not trembling anymore, solid. "Papa Cal," she said. "Yeah. Can we go home now?" Emmett stood, lifted her up. She was heavier than the day he'd found her on the road. 10 pounds heavier. Fed, rested, alive. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go home." They walked out of the church, through the crowd that parted for them, past Jenkins who tipped his hat, past Mrs. Henderson who reached out and touched Josie's hand as she passed, past Tom Carruthers who was sitting on the church steps looking at the sky with the face of a man who'd finally kept a promise. "Tom," Josie said. He looked up. "My mama was right about you." "She didn't even know me, sweetheart." "She knew you'd remember. That's enough." Tom's face crumpled. He pressed his hands to his eyes, and his shoulders shook, and for the first time in 20 years, Tom Carruthers cried without a bottle to blame it on. They rode home. Emmett and Josie on Copper, Miguel behind, Louisa beside them, one hand on her bruised cheek, the other on her reins, riding straight. The ranch was standing. The barn was standing. The south pasture was black and burned, but the north was green, and the cattle were there alive, and the windmill was turning again, because somewhere during the night the wind had shifted and the drought was breaking. Josie slid off Copper's back, stood in the yard, looked at the house, the barn, the windmill. "Home," she said, testing the word, turning it over like something she'd found in the dirt and wasn't sure was real. "Home," Emmett said. She walked inside, small boots on the wood floor, went straight to the room at the end of the hall, opened the door, stood there looking at the bed, the shelf, the rocking horse in the corner that had belonged to a boy named Henry, who'd been 5 years old and loved by a father who couldn't save him. "This is my room," Josie said, not asking. "Yeah." "And it was Henry's room." "Yeah." She walked to the rocking horse, touched its mane, gentle, the way she touched Copper's nose. "I'll take care of it," she said. "His things, I'll keep them safe." Emmett leaned against the doorframe. His burns ached, his eyes burned, his chest felt like it was full of something too large to hold grief and relief and love and loss, all tangled together so tight he couldn't pull them apart. "He would have liked you," Emmett said. Josie looked up. "You think so?" "I know so. Dawsons recognize their own." She sat on the bed, pulled her knees up, looked out the window at the Kansas sky turning gold as the sun dropped. "Papa Cal." "Yeah. I don't want to go back to sleep yet. Can you sit with me?" He sat, on the floor beside the bed, his back against the wall, his bandaged hands in his lap. Josie's fingers found his hair, touched it once, gentle. "Tell me about Henry," she said. And Emmett did. For the first time in 4 years he talked about his son. Not the drowning, not the grief, the boy himself. How Henry laughed with his whole body. How he named every chicken on the ranch. How he'd fall asleep in the barn with the cats curled around him. How he sang better than Sarah, which wasn't hard, but he sang with the same heart. Josie listened, didn't interrupt, didn't say sorry, just listened the way she listened to the cattle with her whole self, hearing what was underneath the words. When he finished, the room was dark, and the stars were out, and Josie was asleep with her hand hanging off the bed, fingers near his shoulder, almost touching. Emmett didn't move, just sat there in his dead son's room with his sister's living daughter and let the silence fill with something other than emptiness for the first time in 4 years. The trial in Topeka lasted 11 days. Emmett rode out with Josie on the 3rd morning. Tom drove the wagon. Louisa rode beside them, her bruised cheek faded to yellow, but still visible. Ada met them at the courthouse steps with Frank Colton, the newspaper editor who'd brought 3 reporters from Kansas City and 1 from St. Louis. Kincaid sat at the defendant's table in a suit that wasn't pressed anymore. His gold watch had been confiscated as evidence. Without it, his hands had nothing to do. They lay flat on the table still like 2 animals pretending to be dead. Federal Judge Raymond Walsh presided. 68 years old. No patience for theater. He read the charges in a voice that could have cut iron. Mail tampering. Obstruction of federal correspondence. Fraud. Forgery. Criminal guardianship abuse. Embezzlement of a minor's estate. Unlawful detention. 7 charges. 2 dead wives behind them. A missing boy named Daniel Marsh nobody had found yet. Louisa testified first. She described delivering Josie, described Sarah's bruises, described the medicine that stopped coming, and the doctor who closed his door. When the defense attorney asked why she'd waited so long to speak, Louisa looked at him with eyes that could melt horseshoes. "Because I was afraid," she said, "and because fear is what men like your client count on." The defense attorney sat down. Ada testified about the intercepted letters, produced her handwritten copies, produced the postal records she'd kept for 19 years. When Walsh asked how she'd preserved documents the judge had ordered sealed, Ada said, "A postmistress answers to the United States Postal Service, Your Honor, not to a county judge who uses the mail system as a weapon." Walsh made a note, a long one. Tom testified about Sarah walking into his saloon, about the shaking hands and the whiskey and the words she'd trusted him with. When the defense attorney asked why the court should believe a known alcoholic, Tom pulled a coin from his pocket, set it on the witness rail. 6 months sober, Tom said. "I stopped drinking the day I decided to keep my promise to a dead woman. You can question my past all you want, but you can't question the fact that I rode 300 miles on a sober horse to put truth in front of this court." Walsh didn't make a note that time. He just looked at Tom with something that might have been respect. Dr. Pruitt was brought from Dodge City under subpoena. He sat in the witness chair with the posture of a man whose skeleton was trying to leave his body. His testimony lasted 40 minutes. He confirmed canceling Sarah's prescription on Kincaid's orders, confirmed refusing to see Josie when she came begging for her mother's medicine, confirmed that Kincaid held his mortgage and had threatened foreclosure if he didn't comply. "Doctor," Walsh said, "are you telling this court that you withheld life-saving medication from a dying woman because a judge threatened your property?" Pruitt's hands shook. "Yes, Your Honor. And you understand the implications of that testimony. I understand I'll lose my license. I understand I deserve to." Pruitt's voice broke. "I understand that a woman died because I chose my house over my oath. And I understand that her 8-year-old daughter walked 2 miles to my door 3 times, begging me to help her mother, and I closed it in her face every time." The courtroom was silent. Pruitt looked at Josie in the gallery. She looked back, didn't blink, didn't nod, didn't forgive, just looked. And Pruitt dropped his eyes first. Deputy Jessup testified about the welfare report he'd filed that went to Kincaid's own desk, about seeing Josie carrying firewood barefoot in the snow, about the system that routed every complaint back to the man being complained about. "The system was the cage," Jessup said, "and Judge Kincaid held every key." Then they called the surprise witness. A young man, 20 years old, thin, scarred hands. He walked into the courtroom, and every person in the gallery saw Kincaid's face change. Not fear. Recognition. The recognition of a man seeing someone he'd thought was erased. Daniel Marsh. Ellen Marsh's son. The boy who disappeared from Wichita 3 years ago. The boy whose complaint Kincaid had dismissed from his own bench. Alive. He'd been living in Denver, working as a printer's apprentice. He'd seen the Dodge City Times story about Kincaid's arrest. He'd taken the train to Topeka the same night. Daniel sat in the witness chair and rolled up his sleeves. Both arms. Scars from wrist to elbow. Burns. Belt marks. The same pattern Louisa had documented on Josie. "He did the same thing to my mother," Daniel said. "Married her. Married. Took our land. Stopped her medicine when she got sick. She died in '79. I was 14. He locked me in the cellar the first night after the funeral and told me if I said a word, I'd end up in the ground next to her." Walsh's face was granite. "I ran. 6 months later. Made it to Wichita. Filed a complaint. They sent it to the territorial judge for review." Daniel's voice went flat. "Judge Kincaid. He dismissed it. Called me a troubled youth with a history of fabrication." Josie in the gallery gripped Emmett's hand so hard her knuckles cracked. Troubled youth with a history of fabrication. The same words Kincaid had used about her. The same script. The same lie recycled for every child he needed to silence. "Mr. Marsh," Walsh said, "were you aware that Judge Kincaid married again after your mother's death?" "No, sir. Not until I read the newspaper." "And when you learned about Josie Rourke?" Daniel looked at Josie. Across the courtroom, a 20-year-old man and an 8-year-old girl connected by scars they never should have had. "I got on the first train," Daniel said, "because somebody should have come for me. Nobody did. I wasn't going to let that happen to her." Josie's eyes filled, for the first time since the trial started. Not sadness, something bigger, the shock of being seen by someone who understood without explanation. Walsh called Josie last. Emmett walked her to the witness chair. She climbed up. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She folded her hands in her lap the way she always did. Controlled. Ready. Walsh leaned forward. "Miss Rourke, you don't have to do this if you're not ready." "I'm ready. I've been ready since Mama died." She told them everything. The belt, the cellar, the cigar burns. Her mother coughing blood into a rag at night. Walking 2 miles to Dr. Pruitt's office 3 times. The wagon to Wichita. The 20-mile walk through July heat. Finding Emmett's fence line. The canteen that was empty. She told them about her mother hiding the diary. About memorizing the directions to the well like a prayer. About the night Sarah climbed out of her deathbed and lowered a tin box into the ground in the dark. "My mama spent her dying on me," Josie said. She could have used that time being scared, being angry, giving up. Instead, she made a plan. She hid the truth where he couldn't burn it. She taught me where to find it. She sent me to the one person she still trusted, even after 12 years of silence. She looked at Emmett. "My uncle let my mama down. He told her not to come back, and she listened, and they were both too proud to say sorry. He knows that. He carries it every day." Josie's voice didn't waver. "But when I showed up at his gate half dead, he didn't ask for papers, didn't ask for proof, didn't call a lawyer. He picked me up and carried me inside and gave me water and said I wasn't sleeping in any barn. And when the judge came to take me back, my uncle said no." "Just no?" Walsh asked. "Just no." Like it was the easiest word he ever said. And the hardest thing he ever did. Walsh was quiet for a long time. The whole courtroom was. "Miss Rourke, is there anything else you want this court to know?" Josie thought about it. Really thought. The way she thought about everything with the full weight of her 8 years and the 1,000 years of living those 8 years had forced into her. "My mama said the truth doesn't burn," Josie said. "Even when everything around it does. She was right. The judge burned our house. He burned Mr. Dawson's pasture. He tried to burn every piece of paper that proved what he'd done. But the truth was in the well, and it's here now, and he can't burn a courtroom." Walsh ruled on the 11th day. Harlan Kincaid, guilty on all 7 federal charges. Sentenced to 22 years in the federal penitentiary at Leavenworth. All judicial rulings under review. All estate transfers reversed. All assets frozen pending restitution. Josie's land restored. 40 acres and a water claim. Samuel Rourke's legacy returned to his daughter. Full adoption granted to Emmett Dawson. Josie Rourke Dawson. Legal. Permanent. Kincaid stood for sentencing. His hands cuffed in front of him. No watch chain. No pressed suit. He looked at Josie one last time. She looked back. Steady. Unblinking. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Whatever he'd wanted to say, the words wouldn't come. The man who'd used language as a weapon for 30 years had finally run out of ammunition. They took him away. The courtroom doors closed behind him. Josie turned to Emmett. "We can go home now." "Yeah, Josie, we can go home." 2 years later, summer of 1884. The south pasture had grown back. Not the same grass, different, thicker, greener. The fire had burned away the old growth, and what replaced it was stronger. That's how prairie worked. That's how people worked, too, if they let it. Josie was 10. She rode copper every morning at dawn. The cattle count was hers now. She read the herd by ear the way Emmett had taught her, and she caught things he missed because her hearing was sharper and her patience was deeper, and she'd inherited her mother's gift for listening to what wasn't being said. The Rourke homestead stood again. Rebuilt by 20 families who'd shown up with lumber and nails and guilt, they were turning into something useful, not fancy, solid, a house that would stand. The apple orchard Emmett had planted around it was 2 years old. 15 saplings from Jenkins' store, 3 donated from his own land. "So your papa's place doesn't just come back," Jenkins had said at the planting. "It grows bigger." The well was uncovered now. Josie had insisted. They'd removed every brick Kincaid had laid and left the stone walls open. She'd planted wildflowers around the rim, purple and yellow, the kind that came back every year without asking. "For Mama," she'd said, "so the truth always has a place to grow." Tom Carruthers sold his saloon. 2 years sober. He'd used the money to open a freight business. Small, honest. He hauled supplies between Dodge City and Kiowa County, and he never touched a bottle. And every time he passed the Dawson Ranch, he stopped and checked on Josie like he was keeping a standing appointment with a promise he'd made to a dead woman in a saloon. Louisa delivered her 100th baby that spring. A girl. The parents named her Sarah. Louisa held the infant and wept in a way she'd never let anyone see before. And when Emmett asked if she was all right, she said, "I'm delivering the future instead of burying the past. That's more than all right." Ada Whitfield retired from the post office, hired a young woman to replace her, spent her days writing letters to every territorial governor in the West about judicial oversight and the protection of orphaned children. She'd sent 47 letters in 2 years. 12 had gotten responses. 3 had led to policy reviews. She said she'd write 47 more if she had to. "Your sister sent 3 letters and changed a county," Ada told Emmett. "I figure I owe her at least 47. Reverend Boone's church was full every Sunday. Not because people suddenly found God, because they'd found each other. The pews that had been half empty for years were packed. Families that had avoided each other sat together. The town matrons who'd whispered about Emmett in the back rows now brought food to the ranch on Saturdays and asked Josie to teach their granddaughters to ride. Josie taught them. Patient. Firm. She sat those girls on horses and said, "Not too tight, not too loose. You're not fighting the horse. You're listening to it." And the girls learned, and their grandmothers watched from the fence and saw something they hadn't expected. A child who'd been beaten and burned and starved and caged teaching gentleness. Like cruelty hadn't won. Like it had just made her more certain about kindness. Deputy Jessup got his badge back. Federal Review cleared him of any wrongdoing. He wore it different now. Not like a weight. Like a choice. Daniel Marsh came to visit that summer. Rode in from Denver on a Tuesday. Josie saw him from the porch and ran. Not to the house. To him. She grabbed his hand and pulled him inside and introduced him to Copper and showed him the ranch ledgers and talked for 3 hours straight without stopping. Emmett watched from the kitchen. Louisa beside him. "She needed that," Louisa said. "Someone who knows without being told." "Yeah." "You okay?" "I'm watching my niece introduce her scars to someone who matches. That ain't okay, but it's necessary." Daniel stayed a week. He and Josie rode the fence lines together. They didn't talk about Kincaid. They didn't talk about Sellers or Burns or medicine that stopped coming. They talked about horses and books and weather and the way the creek sounded different in morning than at night. The ordinary things. The things that had been stolen from both of them and were being given back one conversation at a time. The night before Daniel left, Josie found Emmett on the porch. She sat beside him on the step, bare feet in the dirt, 10 years old, and growing so fast that Louisa had to let out the hems on her dresses every month. "Papa Cal." "Yeah. I want to do something." "What's that?" "I want to visit Mama's grave." Emmett went still. He hadn't been to Cedar Hill Cemetery, hadn't visited Sarah's grave, hadn't stood over the dirt that held his sister because standing there meant admitting she was under it, and admitting that meant feeling everything he'd spent 12 years and then 2 more years avoiding. "I know you haven't gone," Josie said. "Louisa told me." "Louisa talks too much." "Louisa talks exactly enough. She said you're afraid." "I ain't afraid." "She said you'd say that too." Emmett looked at her. This girl, his girl, who'd walked 20 miles through Kansas heat to find him, who'd testified in a federal courtroom at 8 years old, who'd taught grown men what courage looked like by standing still while the world tried to knock her down. "All right," he said. "Tomorrow." They rode out at dawn, just the two of them, Copper and the gray gelding, east toward Cedar Hill, 5 miles. The road was familiar. Emmett had ridden it 1,000 times going to town. He'd just never turned left at the cemetery gate. He turned left. Sarah's grave was in the east plot, under an elm tree, a simple stone, Sarah Elizabeth Dawson Kincaid. The name was wrong, all of it except the first 3 words. Josie knelt beside the stone, put her hand on it, flat, the way she put her hand on the kitchen table when she was being serious. "Hi, Mama." Emmett stood behind her, his hat in his hands, his throat sealed shut. "I'm okay now," Josie said to the stone. "Papa Cal takes care of me. He teaches me the ranch. I can count cattle by ear. I can ride Copper. I'm reading the ledgers." She paused. "I found the well, Mama. I found everything you hid. The diary, the deed, the wildflowers. We used it all. We beat him." She was quiet for a moment, then softer. "I miss you. Every day. Especially mornings. You used to brush my hair before breakfast and hum that song. The one Grandma Dawson sang. I still remember it. I hum it to Copper sometimes. She likes it." Josie stood up, wiped her hands on her dress, looked at Emmett. "Your turn." His legs didn't want to move. His body wanted to be anywhere else. On the ranch, in the barn, in the past where Sarah was alive, and he still had time to make things right. But Josie was watching him, and he'd promised to be brave. He knelt. The stone was warm from the sun. He put his hand on it, felt the carved letters under his palm, Sarah. His little sister who stole apples and sang off-key and loved a man he'd told her not to love, and died in a house with locked doors and no medicine and a daughter she'd trained to survive. "I should have come," Emmett said. His voice cracked on the first word and didn't recover. "I should have come 12 years ago. Should have knocked on the door and said I was wrong and taken you home. Should have said it doesn't matter who you married. Should have said you're my sister and I'd ride through anything for you." His hand pressed harder against the stone. "I didn't. And you died alone, and your daughter walked 20 miles to find me because you believed in me more than I deserved." His shoulders shook. "But she's here, Sarah. She's strong. Dawson strong. She's got your eyes and your stubbornness and your heart, and she's going to be something this territory has never seen." He wiped his face with his sleeve. Rough, the way a man does when he doesn't want to admit what's happening. "I'm sorry I was too proud to send the letter. I'm sorry I said don't come back. I'm sorry for every morning I could have saddled a horse and rode east and didn't." He took a breath. "But I'm raising your daughter right. I swear on this ground. I'm giving her everything you wanted for her and everything I should have given you." He stood. His knees ached. His eyes were raw. Josie took his hand. "She heard you," Josie said. "You think so. I know so. Mama always said Dawsons were too loud to ignore, even when they're whispering." They stood together at the grave, uncle and niece, father and daughter, 2 people carrying the same last name and the same stubborn heart and the scars of a family that had broken itself with pride and put itself back together with choice. Josie reached into her pocket, pulled out a handful of wildflower seeds, purple and yellow. She scattered them on the grave, knelt down and pressed them into the dirt with her palms. "So, you'll have flowers every spring," Josie said, "and so you'll know we came." They rode home, side by side. The Kansas sun was climbing, but the heat was different now. Late summer. The brutal edge softening. The creek was running again. The pastures were green. Somewhere in the distance, a killdeer called high and clear. "Papa Cal." "Yeah." "Thank you." "For what?" "For saying yes when I asked for one night." Emmett looked at her. 10 years old, sitting straight in the saddle, hair catching the light. Those Dawson eyes that saw through everything and forgave what they found. "You asked for one night," he said. "I gave you the rest of them." "I know." She smiled, full, real. The kind of smile that took 2 years to build because trust doesn't come fast for children who've been burned. "That's why I'm thanking you." They rode on. 2 figures against the morning sky. The ranch ahead, the cattle calling, the windmill turning, the south pasture green where fire had burned it black, growing back stronger. Because that's what prairie does. That's what people do. When they choose to. Emmett Dawson had spent 4 years choosing silence, and 12 years choosing pride, and 48 years learning the hard way that love isn't something you feel. It's something you do. Every morning. Every time it costs you. Every time a girl walks 20 miles to your gate and asks for water and you carry her inside and decide that this time, you won't let go. Sarah was right. The truth doesn't burn, and a family built by choice stands longer than any house built by blood, because every board was nailed in on purpose, and every nail was driven by a hand that decided to stay.